Da, 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 da. Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you. Oops,
Today
double talk.
is March 22nd, 2000.
That happens occasionally. I apologize. To introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, it's the first Monday of the month, which means it's time for Monday with the McDougalls. And I want to wish everybody a happy World Vegan Day. So first, I would like to introduce Dr. John McDougall.
Hey, okay. How you doing?
Nice to see you. So Dr. McDougall, I love surprises. I had a whole birthday party for you. It was a surprise. I did. It was really such a wonderful party, actually, considering it was on Zoom. Yeah, and having Dean Ornish and Dr. Esselstyn. Well, anyway, I had a gentleman named Darrell Thompson write me. He also wrote your daughter, Heather, that he had followed your diet, and within 6 months, he became non-diabetic. And I thought, well, what better way to tell the story than to tell you personally? So I'd like to welcome Darrell.
I love to hear it, but I'll probably have a couple of comments when he's done.
Well, absolutely. So please welcome Darrell Thompson to the show. We know that the November McDougall program is sold out, but once they hear his testimonial, maybe they'll join you in January. It's so nice to meet you, Darrell.
Likewise, AJ. It's a pleasure to be on your platform, and it's a pleasure to, I appreciate you guys for giving me the opportunity so that I can let others know that no matter what's going on, you can make a change, whether little or small. Dr. McDougall, I can't thank you enough. I've watched tons of your resources. I was on your website day in and day out. I went to sleep to your material. I woke up to your material, and I just want to thank you and thank your parents for teaching you to just tell the truth, Johnny. I don't know if you remember that, but
I do. That's one of the faults I have.
Yes, and I appreciate that. So I made the transformation in exactly 90 days, so 3 months. July 22nd, I had a routine physical at the VA here where I live. And I mean, I've got a ton of stories, but my doctor, he diagnosed, I went to his office and he diagnosed me with diabetes after giving blood that morning. And he was waiting for the results to come in. He wouldn't let me leave. I had to urinate. I was having frequent urinations. He would barely let me go to the restroom because he was waiting on some results. And the results finally came in, and it showed diabetic ketoacidosis. I'd never heard of that or anything, Long story short, he rushed me to the hospital. My A1C was 16. Can you guys still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
And so A1C 16, I had no idea what that was. Extremely deadly. So I got out of the hospital. I stuck to eating just vegetables, salads, and it just wasn't enough to power me. I knew I needed to work out, lose some weight, and that would help. It wasn't enough to power me. I would have for breakfast before my walk. And this was just August 2021. I would start out with spinach and omelets, because they told me to eat more protein and only eat 30 grams of carbs a day. That was the recommendation of the hospital and the VA. So I get around my first lap of my mile and I'm just ready to pass out. I'm going hypoglycemic. I stumbled across, as fate would have it, I stumbled across Dr. John McDougall, and lo and behold, what I thought was the enemy of that starch is actually the solution. Granted, you have the starch solution. So I gave it a shot, and I noticed I'm starting to get energy. I can go more than a half mile. I can go for 2 miles. I can go for, I went as much as 10 miles, sometimes 15 miles in a day. But more importantly than how far I could go was my blood, my blood glucose levels started to improve drastically. I went from eating boiled eggs and turkey, thinking that would help, and all these proteins, which as a diabetic, you don't need all those proteins. Thanks to Dr. McDougall explaining that becomes toxic on your kidneys. And I mean, I've taken so much of your information, Dr. McDougall, and in 90 days, exactly 90 days from being DKA, and that's very serious diagnosis, to pretty much diabetes being gone. On the VA scale, 6.1 is still like one notch above diabetes, but I'm claiming it's gone. As long as I continue to what Dr. McDougall teaches, I'll be great. I just can't say thank you enough, Dr. McDougall and Mary, for being on Dr. McDougall's side. Thank you all for giving me a chance to live, giving me, you know, there's really no words. My doctor, my actual doctor here, he was surprised. He was upset because I didn't follow their recommendations. And, you know, the way they see it is they pretty much want you to maintain diabetes and quote unquote manage it instead of reversing it or curing it. And I don't see any purpose of managing or keeping such a debilitating disease as diabetes, because it's damaging your eyes, your kidneys, and you start to feel those things. The neuropathy, I've gotten rid of all of that. It's just amazing information that Dr. McDougall has provided.
I don't know how you can be going to the VA when you look like you're 18. Wouldn't you have to be a little bit older?
I appreciate it. I really do. I've been blessed with good genes, and fortunate enough, my genes have led me to you and Dr. McDougall. And you know, I really appreciate that. In 90 days, you can't sometimes finish a class in 90 days. You know, I knocked my A1C 10 points down in 90 days. And, you know, I was able to eat as much as possible. I would get stuffed on the potatoes and vegan gravy, and just you know, and I noticed a lot of Dr. McDougall's old material as well. When he did some commercials on how to eat out in fast food, that helped me out a lot as well. If I'm not home, that will give me tips, just a ton of things. I recommend Dr. McDougall all day. Am I still on, AJ?
You sure are.
How much weight did you lose? So
to be fair, diabetes, it makes you lose weight, right? So I kind of lost track, you know, when you get diabetes. So I was at about 215, right, when I started your journey, and I got down to 197. So about 20 pounds. About 20 pounds.
That's pretty good. As the fact that it took you 90 days, I'd have to say you're a little slow.
Yeah.
You know, I say that jokingly. I mean, you've done really, really well. Some people don't get down to a normal blood sugar and everything straightened out till they hit trim body weight. And you've made great accomplishments, but you've got a little ways to go, I would suspect. Yeah. But it's not unusual for us to take somebody who's on 140 units of insulin. In fact, my medical director, Dr. Anthony Lim, you know, we've been together for almost 5 years, and he used to get kind of worried about me when I would take patients off 140 units of insulin. Well, just last program, he just did that himself, and I could see the big smile on his face. And he speaks about that all the time, how he was taught to manage diabetes. He's done managing diabetes. And I have to say, your experience is what everybody should expect. You know, if you do the program and you have type 2 diabetes, you should expect a cure. A cure, yes. not just some relief or some postponement, but you expect a cure, because the type 2 diabetes that you had, and I have a little question about that, the type 2 diabetes that you had is caused by a normal adjustment that the body takes when it consumes too much food, too many calories, and too much fat. It's a survival mechanism. So it becomes insulin resistant. As a result, you usually stop gaining weight when you've gained 40, 50, 60 pounds. And as a result of the insulin resistance, to stop you losing weight, your blood sugar goes up, and they call that type 2 diabetes. By definition, it is curable 100% of the time with weight loss, and the easiest, most effective way to lose weight is, you've discovered it, it's our approach. You're comfortable, I can tell, with eating starch, and I could tell also you were very thankful somebody told you didn't have to live on broccoli, cauliflower, sprouts, and cucumbers.
Yes.
You know, I can understand why people get discouraged. They look for help, and they get responses like you got from your doctor, which is, well, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it, and we don't do that around here. And really, it's amazing. But I've had patients for my whole career who their patients or the doctors have gotten upset with them because they've cured their problem. Instead of saying to, say, the rheumatoid arthritis patient or the heart disease patient, or like in your case, the diabetic patient, tell me what you did so I can help the rest of my patients for the rest of the day. They don't say that. It's like, next, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I don't want to hear about it. We don't do that around here. You said it so well.
Yes.
I couldn't have expressed it better myself than from your point of view as a patient. But you are cured. You should go the rest of your life. And I know you won't, you'll be compromised a little bit when you fill out applications. They ask about your past history because they won't understand that you cured your diabetes. You should consider yourself forever a non-diabetic. Nothing wrong with you. It's overnutrition, got too fat, the body made adjustments, and the doctor came in and gave you medications that actually might make you fatter.
Yeah.
Develop insulin resistance, so you won't keep gaining weight. And then the doctor gives you insulin shots or pills that raise your insulin levels. And as a result, you keep gaining weight, more and more and more weight. So, you never get better. You can count on it. You will never get better. And if you follow the advice of the American Diabetic Association, you will remain a diabetic the rest of your life. Nathan Pritikin used to tell me that 45 years ago. If you follow the advice of the American Diabetic Association diet, it's a guarantee you'll remain diabetic the rest of your life. And so it is with almost every doctor that you listen to. There are exceptions. You hear a lot about them on AJ's show, the doctors who are exceptions to that practice. But congratulations. You tell the story extremely well. Thank you. You made me feel good.
Thank you. And
I never get tired of hearing great stories like that.
I've passed on your name to, for example, I don't want to take too much time, and I'll just be quick. I've passed on your name to my dentist's office. I'm in there getting some dental work, and they're talking about weight loss, and they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And the ladies now follow the Dr. John McDougall. When I got my results this past Monday or last Monday on no more diabetes, I found out through the nurse before the doctor. The nurse came out, the same nurse that sent me off to the hospital. She came out and gave me the thumbs up and said, "You're a miracle, man. How did you do it?" And I gave her Dr. John McDougall and just a 30-minute walk per day with the starch solution. And because diabetes runs in her family as well. People deserve a chance to live. People deserve to know the truth, and to deserve to know the truth on the proper human diet and their proper fuel. If you put diesel in a gasoline car, you're going to have some problems. And that's what's going on in today's world.
Well, I mentioned this because I assume you are Black also. Eric Adams,
yes, sir.
The mayor of New York, stands up and says he's cured himself of his diabetes using the same approach that you used.
Yes, sir.
He, of course, I assume has a greater public profile than you do, but the word might get out, except for the fact that there's no money behind this kind of truth and this kind of treatment. You look at the advertisements on your TV set all day long. It's for one diabetic pill after another. Those are the high profit pills, or one rheumatoid arthritis pill after another, or one ulcerative colitis pill after another, when these are all dietary diseases easily curable. And the fact that it took you 90 days, well, you'll keep getting better. That's a nice thing. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, doctor.
Well, congratulations, Darrell, and thank you so much for writing me. I think now you need to start giving classes and speaking at the VA.
Certainly. I will do that. My doctor told me I need to write a book. As he sat there looking at his computer screen, not being able to believe those numbers. And I'll find my before numbers, because in my body, everything was out of whack before. The endocrinologist was talking about dialysis, and I was the walking dead. And now my doctor's saying I need to write a book. He's never seen anything like that. So I can't. You guys gave me life, So thank you.
Thank you. You should write a book, because I think people would be more interested in listening to you than listening to me. Your personal story is a great motivator. So yeah, write a book, tell everybody you know. It's a bit discouraging. I've been at this. I've known this for 46 years.
Right.
It's discouraging. You'll look at friends and relatives, and you'll try and make the simple explanation for them, and either they won't get it or aren't interested. But I can tell you, occasionally somebody will listen, just like you listen to somebody. That person didn't give up. They kept telling you, there's another way to do it, and kept telling other people. Eventually you catch one. And
yes, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, let's start thinking about titles. Maybe like potatoes cured my diabetes. Dr. McDougall was right.
Well, I just want everybody to know that the success rate is essentially 100%, because this is due to diet. Everybody in the profession knows it or used to know it. The drug companies know it. They call it diet and diabetes when they talk about type 2 diabetes. Well, you fix the diet part and the diabetes goes away, always, when it's type 2. Now, not when it's type 1. In fact, that's what confused me a little bit. You said you were in diabetic ketoacidosis. That almost only occurs when you are type 1. So what I worry a little bit about is that you have type 1.5 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that means is that you make enough insulin to usually keep yourself out of the hospital. Your pancreas does that. But it doesn't make enough insulin to cover all of your needs. Like your blood sugar might run a little high, or you might have a little frequent urination. Or the other thing, and I know you think I'm joking, is that you may lose too much weight. In that case, you make enough insulin to stay out of the hospital, but not enough insulin to make everything perfect. It's called type 1.5 or partial pancreatic insufficiency. And it's a condition that, you know, with diet and exercise, you usually don't have to take any medication. But if you end up starting to lose too much weight, and believe me, this is in your future, or you develop symptoms of diabetes such as excessive urination, or your mother-in-law or your doctor worries about your numbers and you feel guilty and you feel you need to treat your doctor and your mother-in-law, then you take a little insulin. And I give a long-acting insulin called Lantus, and what people need to take is 1 shot a night. That's what we do for type 1.5 type diabetes. Type 2, which is what 95% of people have out there, is 100% curable. Type 1 is never curable. You have to take insulin. But in between, there's this spectrum. And just be prepared that you may fall in between. And if you do, it's really easy to take care of. And the important thing is when you follow a good diet, you know, your doctors were talking to you about going on a dialysis machine, having problems with your eyes and so on, is you prevent all these complications. Even type 1 diabetics prevent these complications. The reason is because when you have diabetes, you have a metabolic handicap. You know, you get an infection in your toe, you could lose your whole leg. Whereas if I get an infection in my toe, it ain't a big deal. But you can't defend and repair as well. And so when you feed the Western diet, which kills people, sickens people who don't have diabetes, when you feed that to a person with a metabolic handicap, they fall apart at a more rampant rate. And so if you just take really good care of them, like you take really good care of the toes, or you take really good care of the fork and spoon, they never have the complications. And I say this based on a couple of things. One is I met some of Walter Kempner's diabetics. This is the rice diet, who had diabetes for over 50 years, and all of their organs were working perfectly. The other bit of information that I draw upon is that it used to be that any kind of diabetes didn't exist in Africa, but particularly type 2 in rural Africa, except they found about 600 cases of type 2 diabetics in Africa, 600 in the whole darn continent. And what they found is that these diabetics didn't have any complications related to their diabetes. There's one more bit of information out there, and that is there's a genetic issue. And you can find out about this on my website if you're curious. A genetic issue where there are people who have this genetic difference, which causes them to run blood sugars of say 150, 160, 170 all the time. But they eat a good diet, and this whole society has no complications. Anyway, I'm getting too detailed and far away from it. I just want you to know that you fix your problem, you're cured. You always need to think about yourself as cured. And the same option is there for any of you. And it costs you nothing. I want to point that out. You got that for free.
Well, I just want to say, if I can, real quick, Dr. McDougall, the most expensive part of the program was that I had to buy an entire new wardrobe.
Don't buy it yet. I can tell. How tall are you?
5'10", 5'10".
Okay, it would not be unusual for you to see fewer than 150 pounds.
Yes.
So don't be surprised. I imagine when you were 18, you were about that weight, 150 pounds.
Correct. That's correct.
Your bones have not changed since then. So you're going to be end up around 150. And people are going to laugh at you. People are going to think you're sick, that you have AIDS or cancer. You have to be prepared for a lot of different reactions from people. But just kind of shine them off and say, I know what I'm doing. I wish you the same, and kind of forgive them because they just don't understand.
Right. Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you, Darrell.
Good to talk to you.
Likewise.
All right. Well, you keep in touch with us now, will you? I'm sure Heather wants to hear from you too. Write you up as Dr. McDougall. Never get tired of those people like yourself who share their story. So thank you for sharing.
Yep. Thank you for contacting us. So Dr. McDougall, I know you want to talk about women's health, but what's interesting is because you're a doctor and you're also Dr. McDougall, we got so many questions. And since you were talking about diabetes to Darrell, so many people have written in that they're seeing postprandial unfavorable numbers in their glucose reading. And so they get concerned about the high starch, high carbohydrate. And I don't know how to, I'm not a doctor, I don't know how to assure them that it's going to be fine.
Well, first of all, we see people in a clinic situation where we have them locked up. We know exactly what happens to them. And it's not usual for people's blood sugars to go up when they change to a high starch diet. But you have to think about it for a minute. The reason you eat is for your sugar to go up. And when you stop massive doses of pills, which were suppressing your sugar, or insulin, what would you expect but the sugar to go up? If you're looking for control of numbers, you just want your numbers to look better, then you need to pay attention to what happens with the numbers. If you want the cure, then you have to fix the problem. And sometimes it takes a little time. There are a couple approaches I take with people who I know are going to be cured. One is I usually stop all of their medication, because the reason that I worry about them after I start taking them is they get into trouble because of the drugs. They have low sugar reactions. They fall. They have a DUI. Somebody thinks they're drunk driving the car because they're low sugar reactions. So I worry about people until I get them off the medication, and then I can sleep well at night. So, in most cases, I'll stop all the insulin pumps. You can tell your diabetic friend doctors that I do this. Stop all the diabetic pills if I'm pretty certain they're type 2 diabetic, not if they're type 1. But if somebody's cautious, if somebody is a little bit timid about this whole thing, I am willing to take and cut your dose in half, with the idea that you'll have a candy bar around or a whole glass of orange juice and sugar, because you're likely to have a low sugar reaction. And there's nothing more distressing for a diabetic than to have a low sugar reaction, particularly if they're in a dangerous situation. So yeah, I can be cautious as a physician. You come to our program, Dr. Lim will take you slowly off your diabetic pills. But he won't be because he wants to, because you persuaded him to go slow, because he knows what's going to happen. He's taken care of hundreds of diabetic patients so far, and I've taken care of a lot.
Yes, people are commenting on your shirt. They really like it, Dr.
Oh, good. Well, like I say, this is one of my $29.95 shirts.
Yeah, this is one of my $19.99 shirts.
Right. Well, and I joke with AJ because she wanted to buy me a shirt, and I told her I only get shirts from this particular store, and they were a little more than $29.95. But this was I started buying the $29.95 ones when I realized you're right, AJ. They look just as good.
And they feel good too. Well, happy World Vegan Day. I know you don't always identify with that word vegan, but you kind of are, or you're almost vegan.
Well, I have some reservations about taking this approach, which I've taken for over 45 years. And that is, I tell people that I have turkey every other Thanksgiving, because people get scared of the word vegan, not so much now as they did 30, 40 years ago. It was a complete turnoff. And so what I tried to explain to people was turkey was for Thanksgiving, hams for Christmas, candies for Halloween. You got some candy bars there, folks? Birthday cake is for your birthday. I tried to get people to understand that rich foods are for special occasions, that if they choose to eat those foods on special occasions and they do it in a temperate manner, they'll probably get away with it. Otherwise, they'll make themselves good and sick, and they'll learn from that experience. Anyway, that's the attitude I've taken, hoping that I would capture more people, from the dark side by teaching this rather understandable martyred approach than to say I was a vegan. I used to go to vegetarian conferences, for example, the North American Vegetarian Society meetings up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I was a guest every year. And I would get swamped by vegan enthusiasts who would, they would attack me because you kill a turkey on Thanksgiving. I said, well, every other Thanksgiving, and you never know which Thanksgiving it is, and you don't know whether I really do it. Doesn't matter to them. They want me to take a religious point of view. And I said, look, I would say to them, oh, look, I've saved more turkeys. I save more turkeys every year than you do, I bet, with my approach. And by the way, you'll never know whether this Thanksgiving is that Thanksgiving or not when I have a piece of turkey this big.
And just like we never know really, just like we never know really if you have "do not stent" or I will sue" tattooed.
Right. You don't know if I have a tattoo. I'm full of mysteries, AJ. Yeah. Well, anyway, as I say, sometimes I have regret for that, particularly since the vegan movement has gotten so much respect over the years that, I know I've ostracized myself from a lot of vegan persons and communities, and much more so than I've engendered myself with the meat eaters. So, maybe it was a mistake. I don't know, but I'm not going to change it. And I'll tell you what I do these days. Instead of, my approach now is trying to save the planet. And instead of telling people they ought to be vegan, over at the COP26 conference, there's some of my vegan friends trying to get the world to understand that we need to change to a vegan diet to save the world. Rather than taking that approach, I describe what people ought to do is they ought to go back to traditional eating patterns. You ought to eat like your ancestors of 100 or 200 years ago. I mean, not your king and queen ancestors, but the ones who worked in the fields, build the pyramids. The traditional diets of the human being, the foods that 99.99% of the people who ever walked this earth have eaten. And those are starch-based diets. And more than 95% of the food that they consumed was from these starches. For example, the people from Central America, the Mayans and the Aztecs, are known as the people of the corn. 1,300 years, their societies lived on corn. Down in South America, the people in the Andes lived on potatoes. They weren't vegan. Maybe twice a year, maybe on Thanksgiving, they caught a bird or a deer or something. It wasn't a religion for them. But if we get people to follow that kind of diet, that kind of eating pattern, the eating pattern that before 1980, good grief, that was 42 years ago, that over 90% of the population of Asia followed. They lived on a diet that was 90% white rice or more. If we return to the diet of the Middle East, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, that's the breadbasket of the world, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not asking you to be vegan. I'm just asking you to eat like people did 100 years ago. And for the last 100,000 years, they ate that way. This is an aberration, what we're doing now, and an aberration that's not only killing billions of people, but killing the whole damn planet. Get smart. We got to stop this bizarre behavior. Hey, you're getting me carried away. I haven't started what I wanted to do.
I haven't even said anything. Dr. McDougall, you had this gentleman once at your advanced study weekend.
Oh, yeah, Richard Brangham.
And he's going to be on my show Friday.
Oh, well, mention my name. I think I made a friend there.
No, he's amazing. And, the thing is you mentioned what people ate millions of years ago. And it's just really, his book was really eye-opening.
Yeah. I don't think he wants to be identified. He even less so wants to be identified with the vegan movement. But I mean, this man wrote a book about how we became civilized with fire. And the fire that we're talking about is the fire to cook underground storage organs like roots.
Because I'm wondering what
fire, not to kill animals and cook animals.
What did people do with the potatoes and the beans before fire?
I don't know, AJ. I don't see, because we don't really know how far back the use of fire goes. Maybe 1 million years. I think Dr. Brangham will tell you 1 million years the fire has been used by human beings. Prior to that, you get into arguments as how long were we Homo sapiens? Was it 750,000 years? We've been Homo sapiens or longer, or was it 250,000 years? You get arguments as far as that goes. Well, somewhere along in our lineage from lesser primates. We switched from what the gorillas and the chimpanzees eat today. They eat perishable vegetables and fruits. We made a transition, and that transition has been identified by researchers that I happen to be pretty darn good friends with. And what these researchers identified was a change in the primate genome, genetics of primates, where they went from producing 2 amylase producing genes. They had 2 amylase producing genes. Amylase digests amylose and amylopectin, which is starch. Okay, a chimpanzee or an ape, a gorilla, has 2 of these genes. Human beings have on an average 6 and as many as 16 copies of this gene. So when you've got this gene that produces amylase, which allows you to digest starch, you can leave the equator. Otherwise, you're stuck in the equator where the fruits and perishable vegetables are, just like the chimpanzees and the gorillas are. See, because we developed this ability to dig under the ground, grab a potato, we could migrate all over the world. And that's the reason that we conquered this planet, for good or bad. It's because of a genetic change that took place, which we have identified, which is in our ability to digest amylase, which is based on amylase producing genes. Anyway, so you ask, what did people do before a fire? Well, maybe they were gorillas and chimpanzees or closer to them in their genetic makeup, AJ. Did you follow that?
Yeah. Oh, well, I just did 2 weeks of raw food shows, and they don't eat any starch.
Water.
You know?
Well, you know what? I've met a lot of those folks, and it's not any way I'd want to live on cabbage. You have to eat 22 pounds of cabbage a day to get enough calories. Celery, you're going to live on celery. You're going to live on onions. Huh?
They live on fruit, but they seem to look good, and they seem to be thriving.
Well, you know what they do? My guess is raw fooders, they get their calories from fat, from nuts and seeds and avocados, which are not necessarily unhealthy, but they're not. There's no society I can think of that ever lived on a diet based on nuts and seeds. But every society I can think of in the past lived on starch, corn, rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes. There are thousands of different starches out there that can be identified. And they've been the center of societies, including the Neanderthals. Looking at the teeth of the Neanderthals all the way from the frigid Northern Sea to the steamy Mediterranean, they find starch granules in the teeth of the skeletons of the Neanderthals, and they have been declared starch eaters. And the closer you are to the equator, the more you are a starch eater, whether you're a Homo sapien or a Neanderthal. That's your food. When you get way out in the extremes, you get out there where the Inuit Eskimos live, that type of frigid environment, then you switch from a starch-based diet to what's available in the environment, which happens to be the Atkins diet 7 or 8 months of the year. Only for about 2 or 3 months do they have any significant amount of vegetable matter up in these northern latitudes. So I'm sorry, folks. Either you're ignoring or you're not taking the trouble to look at the science, the archaeology that shows the human being is a starch eater consistently.
Yeah. Well, that's my food. I mean, I just don't enjoy other foods as much.
Well, they have to play little tricks, fruitarians and, people who eat raw diets. We talked about, I remember we were talking about the place in San Rafael, Roxanne's. We were talking about that a couple other times ago, and I told you I got the lasagna, which was made of nuts. And it was like this big, about 4 postage stamps in size. And my guest asked me how I enjoyed dinner, because I wasn't going to pay for the dinner. It was $500. So my host says, well, how did you enjoy the dinner? And I said, well, that's barely enough food to get me to Taco Bell. I was just joking.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
You know what? Taco Bell, I think, would have been a healthier meal than what I had that day, because that meal must have been at least 90% fat. Yeah. Not that I'm recommending Taco Bell, folks. Come on now.
Well, you can either eat fat or you can eat a lot, and I prefer to eat a lot.
Well, that's one way to look at it. You can eat starch, or you can not have control of your health and your personal appearance. That's all it is. Comes down to that. And, I tried to convey that message, but, I'm getting a little worried that people are tired of hearing this broken record. That's all I tell you is eat starch, eat starch, eat starch. So that's why I put together a series of McDougall Monday topics. And what I would like to do is I'd like to today, as well as over the next few Mondays, I'd like to present a topic that we could go into in some detail. And I'll only do it for 15 or 20 minutes, hopefully. And then Mary will join me and you guys can ask questions and so on. And I picked a topic this morning, which is on women's health. Would you like to hear?
Absolutely, because I'm a woman and I'm concerned about health.
I have 3 important women in my life. Well, I had my mother, who's died at 93. And I have my wife and partner in life, which is Mary, who, as you can tell, is alive and well, and she'll be joining in just a minute. And I have Heather. And I also have a granddaughter, Chloe. So, hey, I deserve the right to be able to talk to you about women because I love many women. You were worried about one time, I think one of the first times we met, you told me I was a misogynist. Remember that?
No, it's not the first time.
I didn't even know what the word meant. I didn't even know what the
Sure. I'm never going to live that down.
Oh, well, anyway.
You're taking it out of context.
I hope I proved myself to not deserve that title. Okay, well, I want to talk to you about women. From the medical point of view, women are not so healthy. In fact, the saying goes in the medical business is women get sicker, but men die quicker. That makes sense to you? They always talk about how men die earlier in life and their wives outlast them. Well, but they're sicker during their entire life. So, the woman does have a lot of trouble. I mean, you would think that, if you had a really sick mind, you would think that the creator of the female gender was a man who didn't like women because the female was designed with so many weak parts of the body. Typical Western woman can't deliver her baby. Her birth canal is not big enough for the baby to fit out, so you have to take it out through the top, which is a cesarean section. The typical woman, her breasts are painful and cystic. And then 1 out of 7 women, the breast disease deteriorates into breast cancer. Her body is typically over fat. Women are, by number, suffer from obesity greater than men do in our society. Not only just over fat, but obese. Women take that title. So maybe there's a problem there with fat metabolism in the design of women. They have uteruses that don't work out so good either. They have these menstrual periods, which are, for a lot of women, are very painful, very heavy, often filled with clots. And then the uterus breaks down into tumors, non-cancerous tumors called fibroids. Half the women, by the time they get to be 50, have fibroids of the uterus. And then too many women have cancers of the uterus. Again, another organ poorly designed that must have been on the creator's day off. And their bowels, good grief, we have to give women all kinds of problems because a very common complaint. In fact, I learned in my early medical education, I don't know what doctors are taught today, that irritable bowel syndrome is a disease of neurotic middle-aged women. And the way that it ought to be treated is with tranquilizers. Women have all kinds of problems when they go through menopause, hot flashes, depression, poor feelings of well-being. That's a tough time in life. They don't start having heart disease until they're done with reproduction. Somehow, this creator, God, loves women who can make babies. But once you pass through menopause, you suffer the same risk of dying of heart disease as a man. So once you've foregone your reproductive abilities, you're off the favored list. The bones of a woman, they don't stay together very well. In fact, 70% of women by the time they get to be 70, have problems with bone mineral density that classify them as having osteoporosis or osteoporosis. And cancers, cancer of the uterus, the ovary, the breast. I mean, good grief. So you could take the attitude that that women were designed incorrectly, and every time a doctor says to you, when you ask, what is the cause of my problem? The doctor says to you, it's inherited. It's your genetics. That's what you're being told. You got bad genes, lady. Or you can take the attitude that after millions of years, nature designed the female vessel perfectly because of her innate, inherent biologic purpose, which is to carry on the species. She has to be tough. She has to be strong. She has to stay alive long enough to take care of the next generation. It has to be that way. It's that way every place else in nature. But by the first half of their 9th decade, half of women will have heart disease, strokes, or cancer. In other words, you're on your deathbed. All right. That means by the time you're 85. So I've written a couple of books that are primarily focused on women, AJ, and they're the McDougall Program for Women, which I own. It's been passed on from the book company, which was Penguin Putnam at that time. It's Dutton Penguin Putnam now. That book was in the top 5% of sales of that company at one time. And the other book that I got back from my original publishing company, New Wind Publishing, which I wrote, oh my goodness, about 40 years ago. 37 years ago. That's what I wrote 37 years ago. I own the rights to that book. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give both of these books away, AJ. But I'm just going to give away a challenging second opinion now. And later on, when we give other lectures, like maybe when I talk about breast cancer or osteoporosis, I'll give the other book away free. But you can get this book, no gimmick, no charges, no heavy advertising. You can get this book by going to my website, drmcdougall.com, and you use a forward slash checkout. And this book will be available for you at no charge, and you can download it. And then what I encourage you to do is to send it to everybody you know. Send it to all your doctors. After you read it, you'll see why I called it a challenging second opinion. And remember, I wrote this when I was a young man. It took me 6 years to write this book. Anyway, that book's available now. It is about women, talks about osteoporosis, breast cancer, and all kinds of other issues that are important to women and to the men in their lives. And the McDougall Program for Women, I'll make available for free sometime in the near future. Right now, you can get it for $10 on our website. All right. The beginnings of problems we see in little girls. Little girls, because of the Western diet, are going through precocious puberty. Precocious puberty. What we find is that little black girls are going through puberty, what we find in a study of 1,777 girls, of which 90% were white girls and 10% were black girls, is we find that at age 3% of black girls are going through puberty, which means they're developing pubic hair and breast buds. 3% of black girls at age 3, 1% of white girls at age 3. By 7 years of age, nearly 30% of black girls are going through puberty. 7 years old. 7% of white girls. And by 8 years of age, 8 years old, nearly half the black girls are going through puberty. They're developing breast buds and pubic hair. Why is that? Is that right? Are there any problems with that? Any disruption caused in your family by your children becoming adults 4 or 5 years younger than they should be? I think so. Well, this has changed. This is something that's changed over the last 150 years. We've had records. For example, in Norway, in 1830, the average onset of the first bleed, that's menarche, that's when the first bleed occurs, was 17.2 years of age. In 1950, it was 13.2 years of age because of the richening of the Western diet. In Britain, 1850, they started their their first bleed at 16.5 years, the year 2000 at 13.7 in the United States. The little girl started her period at 14, and now she starts her period, well, much younger, 10, 11, 12 years old. In Japan, which we have recent records of, and we have good records of, in 1875, they started their menstrual period around 16. After the war, it was 15.2 years. 1960, it was nearly 14 years old. And now they're having the onset of their womanhood at around 12 years of age, like the rest of the Western world. Papua New Guinea, that's where 92% of their diet comes from sweet potato leaves and roots. 92% of their diet is from sweet potatoes. In the 1960s, the first bleed occurred in a little girl in that society when she was 18 to 19 years of age. So I guess what you should get from this is the female was designed to mature into a reproductive being at a certain time in life when she was mentally and physically capable of that. And that happened to occur about 5 years earlier than it does now. And because of the changes in the Western diet, we have little girls, and as I'll show you in a minute, little boys going through maturation 5 years, 6 years younger than they should. And this causes chaos in our society. I mean, think about what happens in your family when you have to deal with an 8 or 9-year-old who's dealing with physical changes, emotional changes, desires, mental changes, when she shouldn't be going through these kinds of challenges until she's 14, 15, 16 years old. That's the time in life when you're supposed to start a family, not when you're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. The consequence of this early maturation is an increase in teenage pregnancies. 90% of teenage pregnancies end in divorces. A higher rate of single motherhood, maturing a little girl earlier than she should be. A disruption in mother's education. She can't go to school anymore. She's got to stay home and take care of the baby. Poverty. Complications of pregnancy are much greater in these younger girls, children, before they're physically mature and certainly mentally and emotionally mature. Would you be surprised that they have more complications? They have more preeclampsia and more gestational diabetes. And they also have more low birth weight babies and more respiratory distress syndrome and bleeding. They're 40 times more likely to die during the first month of life than a normal weight infant. You think of all the problems in your school, in your community, in your home. Don't you think it would be an advantage to take and give children back their childhood? You know, the kids are supposed to be riding bikes and playing checkers. They're not supposed to be jumping in bed when they're 10, 11, 12 years old. There's a time for that. And by the way, I just want to add one thing, is you who are in your reproductive years, are those sexual desires strong? Do they have an influence on your life that is sometimes disruptive? You can imagine taking those powerful feelings and giving them to children. It's a crime. And the same thing happens with little boys. A study done in 2012, they looked at a group of little boys. What they found is that they're going through maturation 6 to 2 years earlier than they did in past studies. And this is signified by having to shave and the testicles getting bigger, testicles starting to enlarge. All right. And then throughout the rest of life, you suffer from more disease due to the Western diet. There's an interesting study. I just want to take a moment on it. It's a study that confuses doctors and scientists these days. It's not just one study, it's an observation. And that observation is that women who have a high risk of getting breast cancer have a low risk of osteoporosis and vice versa. And it's hard for my colleagues to understand why, unless you understand that they're both estrogen-dependent problems. Breast cancer is aggravated, at least, by estrogen. That's why women who who go through menopause earlier have less breast cancer. Women who never go through ovulation don't have breast cancer. That's why one of the primary treatments for a woman who has breast cancer is take the ovaries out, lower that estrogen. That's why you're given anti-estrogen drugs like tamoxifen or aromatase inhibitors to lower that estrogen, because estrogen increases your risk of breast cancer. But you're also told that estrogen makes the bones stronger. Hey, think about that. You got a choice here. You can have diseased breasts or diseased bones, or you can fix the problem. Anyway, this is an observation that's made. Of course, the estrogen issue is should be very clear to most of you based upon your previous experiences. You know that estrogen promotes cancer. So you have troubles throughout the rest of your life. It's not just not maturation. So let's talk a minute about why the diet causes the estrogen levels to go up. Estrogen, of course, is the dominant female hormone. It's made by men too. It's the dominant female hormone that comes in the form of estriol, which is the pregnancy hormone, and estradiol, which is the hormone that most women have highest levels of during their reproductive years, and estrone, which is the kind of estrogen that's made more dominantly by women after they go through menopause. But they're just a general class of estrogens. And there may be an importance for you to understand the difference in the three kinds of estrogens, but we'll see when we get into that. All right, we find, first of all, that vegetarian women have much lower estrogen levels as a result of tests of their blood and of their urine. They end up excreting more estrogen from their body, the vegetarians do. It doesn't stay in the body. We find that fat and fiber, both, in a lot of the studies when they first started them out, a lot of the studies looked at low fat, high fiber diets, which of course is the direction that we recommend, as opposed to low fiber, high fat diets. And what they found was the amount of estrogen excreted by a woman is much greater when you eat a high fiber, low fat diet. And what they've calculated, this is kind of an interesting number, is that just switching to this, which is not as low in fat as the diet I recommend or as high as fiber, it's just a moderate change. What they found was that that would result in 12 fewer menstrual periods during the entire reproductive life of a woman. I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, if you detest having periods, and I've heard women say that they do, 12 fewer of them in a lifetime is worth working for, isn't it? Anyway, just to mention this menstrual period thing a little bit longer, as my observations have been, and I've taken care of probably 8,000 women, and probably 4,000 at least have been in their reproductive years, is that when women change their diet, they stop having clots, they stop having menstrual periods, they will have their menstrual periods closer together as opposed to being further apart. And so that's one reason you see fewer menstrual cycles in a lifetime. So you see some pretty dramatic changes occur as soon as you change your diet. You don't have to wait any more than a couple menstrual periods to see these benefits. The only thing that would slow you down would be if you have a lot of fat that you have to lose. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Independently, fiber and fat affect estrogens, but fat only affects estrogens because of its effect on cholesterol. Whereas fiber, what fiber does is it does a couple of things. One is it grabs a hold of estrogen that you excrete from your liver into your bowel. What happens is the fiber grabs a hold of these estrogen and pre-estrogen compounds and complexes them and causes them to leave through the stool. Okay, that's how the fiber works. The other way the fiber works is it changes the bacteria in the large intestine. I know you spend a lot of time talking about microbia. The microbe content, the bacteria content, virus content, parasite content of the intestinal tract is extremely important. Well, when you eat a healthy diet, you change to an environment in the colon, which involves the bacteria and the production of enzymes by these bacteria, which reduce the amount of estrogen in your whole body. All right, here we have a research paper showing that the amount of estrogen in your body and also in your stool is dependent upon the kind of bacteria you grow. And the way you grow healthy bacteria is you eat a starch-based diet. In other words, eating animal foods causes you to grow very unhealthy bacteria. All right, cholesterol is a precursor to many, many important things in our body. It's a precursor to vitamin D. In other words, to make vitamin D, you start with cholesterol and you apply sunshine to the skin and you make vitamin D. And a few changes go on in the liver and the kidneys too. Your sex hormones are also made by cholesterol, from cholesterol. And they turn into both male hormones and female hormones, both of the estrogen type and the progesterone type. So you need to have some cholesterol. Well, the human being makes all the cholesterol that the human being needs. And so we have no problem with making enough cholesterol or vitamin D or other down the line products of metabolism. But this might bring up for some of you the concern about what happens when you artificially lower cholesterol. I don't mean by eating a no cholesterol diet. I mean by taking powerful drugs. Well, one of the concerns I have with people who take statin drugs, particularly when they aggressively take statin drugs and they get their cholesterols down in the range of 60, 70, 80, is they don't have enough of this precursor, this fundamental substrate that's necessary to make vitamin D and sex hormones. Fat makes estrogen. It takes adrenal hormones and it converts them in the body fat into estrogen, primarily into estrone. So what happens is when you go through your menopausal years, prior to your menopausal years, you have mostly estradiol, which is called E2. Okay. If you get pregnant, then you produce a lot of estriol, which is called E3. When you go through menopause, what happens is your ovaries shut down and you stop bleeding. In fact, the definition of menopause is stopping bleeding. And sometimes they say after you stop bleeding for a year. So what happens when the ovaries shut down is the production of estradiol decreases and the production of estrone becomes dominant because estrone is made in the body fat. So what typically happens as women get older and men get older, they get fatter. And each of those fat cells is an estrogen factory. And so as a result, the more overweight you are, the more overfat you are, the more diseases related to estrogen that you have, which includes what we just talked about a minute ago, is overweight women have better bone mineral densities and less risk of osteoporosis. Why? I mean, think about what we just talked about. They have higher estrogen levels. That's the primary reason. The other reason is overweight women do a lot more exercise because they have to carry around a lot of excess weight. But that extra estrogen you make also puts you up for breast cancer and uterine cancer. So anyway, that's another source of estrogen. So you've got the food. Okay, here's another source of estrogen that I find interesting to say the least, and that's cow's milk. It used to be that if you had a cow, the cow roamed around the backfield. And you went out and you milked Daisy a couple of times a day at most. And then when she got pregnant, you gave her a break. You let her go out to pasture. You stopped the milking process. But that's not the way it occurs in modern farms. In modern farms, they milk them 25 gallons a day instead of a gallon a day. They milk them all day long. If you get pregnant, too bad. You still get milked. Well, during pregnancy, you produce a lot of estrogens in the growth of that calf. And if you're going to drink milk from pregnant cows, which is what you're doing, you're going to consume very potent estrogens, mainly of the estrone type, because this is estriol and estrone. Anyway, milk products supply 60 to 80% of the ingested female steroid hormones, sex hormones. So this is a very significant part of the hormones that you're getting is from cow's milk, cheese, yogurt, etc. All right. Injection of hormones. That's another way that they get to get extra estrogens. In Puerto Rico, back in the 1960s, little boys were developing breasts because of the chickens that were injected with estrogens. And little girls are starting their periods at like 3 years of age from the injected drugs. Since the 1950s, the FDA has approved the injection of drugs, not just antibiotics, but also hormones to promote growth and to promote a bit more efficient milk production. So the natural estrogens that they inject are the ones that are in people, like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, the natural anabolic drugs that they inject. And then there are a whole bunch of synthetic drugs that they inject too that never really were intended or never really did appear in an animal, but in the laboratory, they made something even more potent, even less expensive. All right. You can buy these drugs over the counter. You know, farmers go in and they buy them without any prescriptions. In 1988, the European Union banned the use of all these hormones, but not in the United States. The other way that you get high levels of estrogen, which promotes early maturation, which promotes strong bones, which promotes more cancer, et cetera, just to bring you back to our original discussion. The other way is from what we call xenoestrogens, which are chemicals that are put in the environment that have a hormone-like effect. And there are all kinds of these hormones produced by various kinds of manufacturers. Now, I've just listed a few of those: plastics, pesticides, tap water, cosmetics. That's just a few. Now, the thing about these chemicals is they're fat soluble. In other words, they get sucked up and accumulated in fat. So as you move up the food chain, what happens is you biomagnify the concentration of these chemicals. And you bioaccumulate a whole bunch of estrogen in the body fat. So let's start with the low levels of these chemicals in the environment. Say they're on the seaweed or the algae or on the grasses and grains or in the feed. They're very low levels. And what happens is an animal, a fish, a cow, a pig, or so on, goes and eats large amounts of these foods. And the fat, because it's attracted to and soluble in their body fat, the fat from these hundreds of pounds of food, the chemicals from these hundreds of pounds of food get sucked up and accumulated in the cow or the pig's fat. And then what happens is we as human beings, we eat the fish or the cow or the pig or the chicken. Chickens are about 50% fat. We eat those foods and we end up eating, what, 100 and, I don't know, a lot, maybe a couple 100 pounds of meat, a deer, and I can't even think about how much dairy people eat. Well, all of that chemical is sucked up and concentrated in your body fat. You'll increase the amount of chemicals from the grasses and grains and seaweed to you by thousands fold. And the end of this bioaccumulation, this food chain, is the baby sucking off mother's breast. The Environmental Defense Fund did a study in 1978 where they examined the milk from 1,400 women in 48 states, breast milk. And they found such high pesticide and environmental poison content that they declared human breast milk an environmental hazard. You know, in the Inuits, who eat a very high animal food diet, the breast milk in the Inuit woman is so toxic that it's been declared that it should be buried in a special waste dump. 60% of a woman's pesticide load is dumped into her baby during the first 6 months of breastfeeding. You know, this is why you need to start eating really good when you're young, because you accumulate these as children, as teenagers, you know, as young adults. You accumulate these chemicals in your body, and when you get pregnant, you have your children. And this applies to men too, not just women. You're dumping a whole bunch of chemicals on the genes of your future offspring. You're causing problems, genetic defects, cancers, etc. So I did a study, AJ. I did a study on women as far as diet and breast cancer is concerned. It was the first study ever published on the dietary treatment of breast cancer. I published it. You see my name up there. It was published in Diseases of the Breast in 1984. And I pulled out a couple of charts here on what happened to women who changed to the McDougall diet. And this is, 37 years ago. And what you see there is we had a dramatic reduction in estrogen levels by switching from the typical Hawaiian Western diet to the McDougall diet. In this particular study, we published it. An overall change that was significant in the estrogen levels. So it's, I showed it 40 years ago in our patients that by changing to a healthy diet, you dramatically reduce the estrogens. And if you happen to be raising children, they'll mature at a time in life when it's normal, when they're 15, 16, 17, 18 years of age, not 10, 11, 12. And you'll go throughout life and your organs will work just the way they should. The breasts will be in good shape and the uterus will be in good shape and the bones will be in good shape, et cetera, and you'll avoid the cancers. It's a win-win situation. Well, next time, AJ, what I'm going to do, since I showed you a study I did on the dietary treatment of breast cancer that I performed in the early 1980s, is I'm going to make the topic breast cancer. But I thought of some other topics that we could do in this theme of talking about medicine for women, the McDougall Program for women. And if you want to get a head start on this, I encourage you to start with McDougall's Medicine, A Challenging Second Opinion. Free, no gimmicks. Get it off our website. And you can at least get read up and get up to speed because we're going to be talking about breast cancer, which is discussed in detail in that particular book. And by that time, I don't know whether we'll be in a position to offer the next book, but we're going to give the rest of them away free too. Thank you, AJ.
Thank you, Dr. McDougall. I'm really excited that you're going to talk about breast cancer because I recently sent you an article that they were saying that nuts help people with breast cancer.
Yeah, well, they may. Remember, nuts are not unhealthy. They're just rich. What I remember is that avocados, because they're high in fat, also accumulate a lot of environmental chemicals. But I'll have to look that up. But that's what my memory still holds, is that these plant foods they accumulate the fat soluble chemicals also, just probably not as severe as animal foods. But it's just that they're in hard shells and you're not supposed to eat very many. It's just that they come in season only during a short period of time. Avocados, we used to have an avocado tree right next to our house in Hawaii, and it would come into season for only a week or two a year. Whereas I find avocados in season at new seasons in Whole Foods all year long.
One of the things you said in the presentation, which I never thought about before, because I too am concerned about young girls reaching menarche at a very young age and possibly getting pregnant, was that the cows that are giving milk are pregnant. They're pregnant themselves.
The cows are pregnant. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Is that the reason? Because just to play devil's advocate, if people had a cow in their backyard and drank that milk, would it be as much of a problem, or is it?
But they didn't lactate. They didn't milk the cow. They didn't milk Elsie when she got pregnant, when she was the family pet. They put her out to pasture and let her take a break. But modern milking machines, they milk, like I say, 28 gallons of milk a day, all day long. Whether the cow's pregnant or not, she never gets a break. That's the difference.
And aren't they giving the cow mass doses of these hormones and antibiotics?
They do that too. But naturally, the cow produces very high levels of estrogen because she's pregnant.
Right.
But yes, they give chemicals also, and I tried to point that out, that there are a whole bunch of hormones, antibiotics, and so on that are given in feedlots That's the business.
Other doctors aren't, like pediatricians, they're not like making this connection.
Well, as much as cardiologists make the connection of food and heart disease, what do you expect? This is a fee-for-service business. We have no incentive to get the patients well. So, whereas things like the precocious puberty, which should make every parent, every doctor, every pediatrician up in arms, it's the main source of chaos in our society, is this premature maturation. You would think that any decent moral person would stand up and stop it. But hey, it's no worse than dropping dead of a heart attack or getting prostate cancer or rheumatoid arthritis. So why should we take any action? It's buried. It's lost in the library unless it has a profit attached to it. That's just business. That's just the way people are. There's nothing special about doctors or scientists or parents. All of us, we bring to the forefront things that are to our advantage, particularly our financial advantage. It's nature, it's normal, it's human behavior. Recognize it and do something about it. Just because things are the way they are doesn't mean we can't change them. And I know you know that as individuals because you've taken control of your health.
So
Hi,
what
Mary.
was, hi, Mary, nice to see you.
I thought I'd join you.
I love having you, Mary. I know that, Mary, if it hasn't appeared in the chat, people are going to wonder what's in your coffee mug. I'm guessing it's some kind of tea.
It's tea.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
let's see. Well, Republic of Tea. I think this is
I gave you the caffeinated this morning.
oh, okay.
That's why,
Yeah, well,
just so I could
that's
get,
why
I needed to
I'm-
get her a little excited for the show today, AJ.
So it's either mango salon or papaya something, but it's a black tea, but it has these flavors to it. And Republic of Tea is my favorite kind of tea, and it just happens to have these great flavors that oh, he's looking to see which
And
one.
I like their cans. They come in very cute
Yeah,
cans. I
the
remember.
cans are really nice. But if you buy them on Amazon, you can get them in bags. And so you have less cans to throw away.
There you go.
Okay, so this one was passion fruit papaya.
That's what I gave her
And
this morning.
that's the can, but look at this. Look what I found on Amazon. The Republic of Tea. This one happens to be decaf ginger peach. And it's in a recyclable package.
That's cool. I love tea. I mean,
Isn't
it's
that cool?
so hot where I live. I don't get a lot of
So,
chance to
you
drink.
know, try and see if you like it, and then buy a bag of it, and then you have a recyclable bag.
What
that
do you
you
say?
don't
You
think-
mean because you can put the bag in a recycle bin?
Well, no,
No, I mean, you
the
close it
bags
up.
are in there. The bags are in here,
Yeah.
just like they're in here.
Yeah. What's recyclable about this?
All
You,
more.
you can close up the top. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, but it's more recyclable than a can.
All right. I
See, they
I don't
all-
I don't
they-
understand. I don't understand
they
everything
come-
she says.
They come like this, and there are 50 of those in there,
Yeah.
just like there are 50 of those in here.
So I guess the recyclable part is you can snap them back together, right?
No, you can, it's just,
Well, when I think of recyclable, I think about this can sitting over there that says recyclable. You got me confused.
well,
You
Never
can-
mind. Let's
you can
move
use-
on. Let's
You
move
can
on.
use the can to hide like your family jewels.
yeah, that's true.
So people are saying that they're seeing McDougall, a challenging second opinion on your website for $9.95 and want to know how can they get it free.
No, it should come up free. Okay, do you have a link there, don't you, AJ?
I don't want to jump screens, but I'll get it for the people and I'll put it in the show
Okay,
notes.
well, I gave you the link there. Let's see if we can get it back up here. This is the link that I have.
If you want to put it in the chat, I will cut and paste and put it in the show notes.
Oh, I don't know whether I can do that or not.
Here. This is the chat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
This-
that should give it to you right there. drmcdougall.com/checkout.
Okay. I will look for it. Why do I don't?
And if it doesn't, then
We'll find it because I got it for free when I just clicked the thing a few days ago. You had sent out an email.
Well,
Jenna.
I've
The
actually,
other one, but they have to know the other one is not free. So you maybe have to click on just that one.
well, when it comes to, well, I tell you what, maybe when you come to check out, it puts a negative $10 on it. But I know that I've used this link, and when I went to the checkout for that book, it was $0, including no mailing fee. It's, of course, it's a download, PDF download. So I don't understand why it doesn't work right now. It should be working.
We will get that information to the people. I would love an audible of you reading it with your passion.
Yeah, you know,
You'll be taking days.
the problem with things that I've written is I enjoy them.
Well, and the thing is that when he reads them, he thinks of something he wants to add. So it would be an abridged version of the challenging second opinion.
But there are so few things, though, Mary, as we talk about a lot. So few things I've had to change.
Oh, I know, but there's like one or two words.
Yeah,
You say, well, I'll put this in here instead.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the book. It's one of the basic books and one of the more important books that I've written, and it's one that probably has gotten me in most trouble. It was reviewed by 3 other physicians that I was working with at the Honolulu Medical Group when I was there at the time of publication. So I had it reviewed by not just 3 other physicians, 3 specialists from each category. I sought them out in the city of Honolulu and asked them to read it and edit and correct it. But probably the biggest trouble I've gotten into is with my colleagues, or I don't know, sometimes it's not colleagues, but it's people who say to me, look, McDougall, why don't you just stick with the diet stuff? Why'd you have to get involved with telling people not to have heart surgery, or that they could get better from their inflammatory arthritis by changing their diet, or that the osteoporosis medications cause more harm than good, or diabetic pills kill? Why don't you just stick to your food? That's the kind of feedback I've gotten. I said, well, I can't. I'm a doctor. And besides that, people will take the easy way out. So if they think that they're going to be cured by the pills, rather than having to make this major change in what they eat, what do you think they want to do? But if they understand that they're not going to be saved from heart disease by having their chest sliced open and cost them $350,000, they understand that this is fraud, then they're going to be more interested in another solution, which is the food. So that's why I had to do both. And that's why I wrote books about both, and I have written books about both over the years. Written about nutrition, which I have a passion for, of course, which is my diet therapy. That's why I have a passion.
Yep. Would you like to answer some questions or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Because, I tell people that we get, when there's any doctor on, we get so many questions emailed to us that I can't get to the questions in the chat. I'm sorry, guys, you're going to have to get on my mailing list to do that, but I'll answer. I asked them in the order they were received. And I did send you this one from Laurel, because you had actually mentioned osteoporosis in your talk today. And she says, and I think this is the case with a lot of people, I thought I was doing so well on my plant-based way of eating and moving. I just got diagnosed not only with hypothyroidism, but with osteopenia. In 2019, my DEXA scan showed fabulous bones. And now, nope, despite the heap of kale, other greens, exercise, yada, yada.
Right.
I've heard that levothyroxine for hypothyroidism blocks calcium absorption or somehow interferes with bone building. Have you heard this?
If you're treated with an excessive amount of supplementation, in other words, you take too much thyroid pill, what happens is that causes bone loss. So you don't want to do that. You want to monitor your thyroid. If you're on medication in particular, you want to monitor your TSH levels, thyroid stimulating hormones, to make sure you're not being overtreated, because overtreatment can cause increased metabolism of the bone and bone loss. So the question was, why do I have osteopenia at age 70 or 67 or whatever she is? It's because it's natural. That's why. You're supposed to. And that's why 70% of women in those years suffer from osteopenia or osteoporosis. 70% of women. Again, going back to my initial slide, was God hates women because he designed them so poorly. I mean, there's no mistake. Those extra minerals are there. There are 2 pounds of them. They're stored in your bones to grow the baby and to make the baby milk. You store 2 pounds of minerals in your bones during your reproductive years. When you hit 50, you're supposed to stop having babies. There's no reason to carry that extra 2 pounds of mineral around. So what would you expect to happen to your bone mineral density? It goes down. And by the way, those of you who, we talked about the early part of life. What happens is you go through menarche, puberty. Remember I told you menarche is the bleed. Puberty is the breast buds and the hair. You go through those about 5 years earlier than you're supposed to. Well, so on the other end of life, you have an exaggerated time. The time you're supposed to stop your period on average, and I say this on average in healthy populations, is age 48. The average age for American women is 52. We know that more years of menstruation on either end are associated with more cancer, more heart disease, earlier death. Why? Because you got in both situations by eating the same denominator. It's the same food that makes you sick throughout life and causes you to have extra estrogens, which causes you to bleed longer. And the diseases related to estrogens and causes your children to mature early, or your grandchildren. This is not rocket science, ladies and gentlemen. This is so simple. You ought to be sitting here saying to yourself, why doesn't everybody understand this? Well, it's because it's not profitable. That's why.
Wow. Well, we're going to get the link for people. People are asking about progesterone cream.
Yeah, a guy named Lee. Lee used to be a friend of mine, and he was in Sebastopol. He lived in Sebastopol. I'm trying to think of his first name right now, but it doesn't matter. Lee, you remember him?
Yeah, we went to his house.
Yeah, okay. He wrote a book about progesterone being the only important hormone. And actually, he used to substitute on my radio show when I had to go out of town. But he was a strong believer in progesterone. He thought it would stop bone loss. It's well known that progesterone reverses some of the estrogen effects that are negative. So, for example, if you decide to take postmenopausal hormone therapy, which we're going to talk about, it's going to be one of our lectures coming up on McDougall's Mondays. If you decide to take that, you have a great increase of having uterine cancer. But doctors prescribe progesterone along with the estrogen to reduce the risk of uterine cancer, but it doesn't eliminate it completely. If I remember correctly, it reduces it from a 16-fold increased risk by taking estrogen alone to about a 2-fold risk. So it does that. Progesterone is the pregnancy hormone, so it increases your appetite, and therefore it's believed that it makes you have more trouble with weight loss. Maybe. I'm not convinced that progesterone alone keeps the bone strong. I have no doubt that taking estrogens builds bone. I give estrogen as skin creams, and we're going to talk about that some other Monday.
Great. Okay. There are so many, there are so many questions, Doctor.
You'll never get through all your Mondays.
Well, but that's okay, because those who are, I think people already know the answer for, I'll just give short answers.
Nice. Oh my God. I mean, because so many people, one of the problems is they give like very specific medical information. It's almost like they need a medical consult. You know what I mean? Or
AJ, what I would suggest they do is they sign up for the 12-day internet program, which by the way is sold out for November. So the next program's in January. Is sign up, and then the whole staff spends the whole 12 days with you. Mary and I are there available all day long. We spend every morning with you. We have a fireside chat every morning for 12 days where we just sit there and we goof around like we do now. I get a chance to give lectures. Mary and I are there for consults. The rest of our staff is there to help you.
And they get to ask all kinds of
Yeah,
questions.
you don't leave there with any.
And what they always ask is what you had for dinner the night before.
Oh, yeah, that's how we start.
Yeah. So if you want to have that personal care, which you get free by coming to AJ's show, if you want to have that personal care in a very intense way with a well-trained medical doctor, Dr. Anthony Lim, who will treat you with McDougall's medicine, I want to tell you that when you read that book, McDougall's Medicine, A Challenging Second Opinion, you go, my goodness, I wish my doctor could care of me that way. Well, I know one place you're going to get a doctor to take care of you that way. That's at our 12-day program. I guarantee you'll get McDougall's medicine. And I guarantee it'll be a challenging second opinion. And I guarantee you we'll get you off all unnecessary drugs. That's what they're there for is sick people take drugs, healthy people don't. We're going to get you healthy. And our success rate is huge. It's even better in the internet program. I know that really shocks people. They think about, oh, I could come to Santa Rosa, California, have a vacation, sneak out at night, go to the bar and drink with my friends. They used to do that,
I'm sure they did.
Well, you can't, you
They
have
can
to,
do that at
you have to
home.
stay at home, just-
Well, yes, the 12-day program is fantastic. I get to do cooking demos. Diane Rowland, who's been on with you before, says it's fantastic. But look at Darrell. He didn't even do your program. I mean, he did your diet. He didn't even take your program, and look at his results.
But it's been this way for 46 years. I've had a certain number of people come to see me in my office at my live-in programs at St. Helena Hospital and in Santa Rosa. But most people, or not most, but yeah, a lot of people, I mean, it's free. Everything's free. It's all on the website. But it's free to learn how to do my taxes. I just have to go to the library and get a book on it. If I really want to be good at taxes, I'd hire a consultant to help me, or at least take a class on how to do taxes. If it's not working for you, it's not your fault. You need to have a better education, a more intense education. You need to have whatever those hurdles are that are standing in your way, you need to have them knocked down. And we'll do that. We're professionals. We've been doing this for a long time. Mary and I have been doing this for 46 years.
I know, and you guys don't seem to get tired of it.
Well, because first of all, we're in pretty darn good health in our mid-70s. And second of all, we love what we do. But what greater job could there be than what we do, AJ? You have a glimpse of it being a hostess on a international broadcast of helping people. Doesn't it feel good to bring?
I love when I get emails saying, I saw your show with such and such. It's so cool. Yeah, absolutely. You know what I think I'll do, Dr. McDougall, is instead of asking me the very intimate, personal medical ones, I'll answer like general ones. Like, for example, this one, does Mary have a cookbook with photos of all her recipes?
The only cookbook that has photos of some of the recipes is The Healthiest Diet on the Planet.
It is so expensive to do photos. I'm doing a cookbook now with them.
It
Oh
is.
my God.
That's why I chose to focus on the more recipes I could get in, the better. And I had a limited amount of money that I could use to write the book. And I chose to put in, 350 recipes instead of 100 recipes and 100 pictures.
Yeah. Yep. That's how I've rolled so far, but people really want photos, but they're so expensive to not only take, but to put. Thank you. So here's a good general question. And Dr. McDougall, I've had 3 doctors on the show so far with 3 different opinions. So we'll see what you guys think. This is from Irene. I want to know what the McDougalls know about nutritional yeast.
Okay. Well, nutritional yeast used to have B12 in it. And it's not because yeast make B12. It's because they grow the nutritional yeast on a B12 enriched medium. Okay, so that used to be the main pitch for taking nutritional yeast, was it provided B12, which is an issue that we talk about sometimes. But I don't know of any other particular advantage to it.
I don't know if they do that anymore.
No?
No.
Well, maybe
Now nutritional yeast is just used to give things a cheesy flavor. And so, I mean,
No-
that's what I use it for.
In other words, it's spoiled food, right?
It's not spoiled.
It tastes like cheese. It's fermented, or not even fermented. What do they call it? They're both
Fermentation, yeah.
stinky. Yeah. You know, cheese eaters. Cheese. You know, they call it cut the cheese. Cheese stinks. I can't tell you the number of people who have noticed that have given up dairy, particularly cheese, and have noticed a big change in their body odor. I'll never forget this one lady who told me that her husband, she couldn't stand, she had to leave the room when he took off his shoes because his feet stunk so bad. And as soon as he gave up the dairy, he was just a sweetheart.
I have a
Cheese
great
stinks.
I have a great question for you, Mary, from Morgan. Handy kitchen gear.
Handy kitchen.
Recommendations. Yep. For handy kitchen gear.
Oh. Well, have you ever been there when Jeff does his Spurtle demo?
It's a spatula.
It's like
and-
a spatula and a scoop in one, so you can use it for all kinds of things. So I have a set of Spurtles that I use, but handy kitchen gears. Oh, I like my. One thing we found, it's something you put in a half an onion, and you can slice through the onion just perfectly.
You know, you should just go over there and get a whole bunch of your handy stuff.
Handy kitchen. Well, I'm just thinking of handy kitchen gear. Everything else would be
Like knife and pot, right?
yeah. That's all you need.
That's my handy kitchen gear, is a knife and a pot and a spoon.
A spoon. Let's see.
But that was a neat thing. You know, it's we worth telling the people about, because I found that extremely helpful.
Yeah.
To stick those little prongs in the onion and slice the onion that way.
Yeah.
That was a
So that's handy kitchen gear.
You couldn't beat that
A
one.
lemon squeezer, one of those things to squeeze lemons and limes. That's a handy kitchen gear. Even though you can squeeze the lemon by hand or the lime by hand, but
How about a garlic press?
garlic press would be a handy.
Pretty
but-
common, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty common.
I'm not being very imaginative.
Well, it's not bad though, because otherwise you have to smash it by hand or cut it, mince it by hand.
We really use very simple stuff. Mary has a steamer, portable steamer, and she cooks
Like
on the
Instant
stove.
Pot,
Instant Pot, yeah.
air fryer,
You don't use
But-
the air fryer though, do you?
not often, no. We use simple things because we eat simple food. So I can't think, I'm trying to think of.
And besides that,
handy kitchen gear.
you have a simpleton cooking with you.
I have a good chopper here and a
Really,
good
you
cleaner
can't make it very complicated for me. There's no purpose to that either. So, you know, if you take me into the kitchen, it's got to be really dumbed down.
Well, maybe one day you'll take us in your kitchen and give us a tour, because people have been asking you to come on for so long, Mary, doing like a cooking demo or showing the pantry, those kind of things, if you're ever willing.
Well, I'll think about it.
Okay, well, you let me know. Hey, Dr. McDougall, you know what I wanted to ask you, and this isn't about medicine, but one of the things I've always admired about you is, you know, when you used to have your advanced study weekends, you would have guests of differing opinions on. You
Yes.
wouldn't just have vegans on.
Right.
And so I'm vegan for 45 years almost, and most of my guests are vegan because that's what I'm interested in, people that promote that. But I will have people on, that's not a prerequisite, especially if they're not talking about diet. But people get so upset with me, and I'm going to unfollow you. Like I had Dr. Robert Lustig on.
Oh, yeah.
And we had I thought it was a very good interview and a very nice conversation. We talked about what we agreed on, not what we disagreed on. But
Yep.
people get so angry, and there's only 3% of the population that's vegan. And I guess I could make it a rule that only vegans come on my show. But did you ever get criticism for interviewing people that were not of like mine, and how did you handle it?
I guess I just don't care. You know, I have a pretty solid shield up around me, and it's kind of necessary. It goes along with the job.
I think you got criticism.
Maybe, but
From-
I would
but
announce
that
people.
Criticism came from people that were really strict vegans.
Well, animal rights people too. We got a lot
Yeah.
from them, and I understand why they were
But
concerned.
the people that didn't criticize him were people that were really interested in health and wanted to know what this other person had to say about health.
Well, and plus I would start out every weekend by explaining to people during the advanced study weekend, this is a weekend where I have a chance to bring to you people who disagree with me. Not violently, but enough so that you will learn something from the disagreement. You know, just like when our show that we did last week with Michael Greger, you know, I even though Michael Greger has done many presentations for us, you know, I've wanted him to discuss publicly the things that we disagree about, which we would do in a very friendly manner, or at least I would, so that you'd learn. And so I'd invite all kinds of people like Richard, I'm sorry, the Catching Fire, Richard.
Richard Wrangham, he's going to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
he's not a vegetarian.
I heard he was vegan. That's what I heard.
Not when he came to our weekend. Maybe we had an influence on him. Or Lustig. I tried to get Lustig to come on my show many times to attend a weekend, because Lustig would have been an ideal person for you to learn from when he would get up there and give his ideas. And I always had the last word. So at the end of the line, every time there was a line with questions and answers, you always found me at the end. And you often that conversation with the last question would go on for a long time. But I think people waited for that. You need to see what's going on so that you can make a choice. Who's telling you the most relevant truth? Not that there isn't a little bit of truth in everything, there is, but what is most relevant to you? What will give you what you want in terms of your health and personal appearance? You know,
My feeling is, though, if I'm wanting to introduce people to the way I eat and why, I would want to have a conversation with them, you know, and not exclude them.
well, you know, the problem we run into, just like my discussion about me having turkey for Thanksgiving, which I never know is true, is that it's a religion. This is science, ladies and gentlemen. This is about your care. It's not about my beliefs or prejudices. This is not a religion. You need to know what the truth. There are truths out there. There really are. I know in this day and age, you wonder whether anybody's telling the truth. I don't wonder, but you may wonder.
Yeah. Well, here's a good question for both of you, because Mary's mentioned, or at least Mary's minion, and so, and we get this question a lot in general about low iron, and it's from Vivian, who says, what do we do if a blood test shows low iron? My doctor says eat meat. That's what the answer always is, isn't it? I added grape nuts to my breakfast. I added the occasional Flintstone with iron vitamin. I cringe now when people are doing the Mary Mini diet because I think they won't get their iron and calcium. So,
well, iron is part of the chlorophyll molecule. So plants have to have it to exist. So they have to get it from the ground. So it has to be in the plants. There's loads of iron in the plants. And when you eat a vegetable diet, you're taking ascorbic acid, which makes iron much more efficiently absorbed. So you never have to worry about iron deficiency anemia based on it when you eat a starch-based diet. Why would you be iron deficient? Well, most commonly is bleeding. You want to make sure that you're not bleeding, and that would be from the uterus or the vaginal area. The uterus and vaginal area and the bowel. So, you know, you want to rule out any source of bleeding. Now, once you've done that, what you're left with is the second most common, which could be the first most common, the second most common cause of iron deficiency anemia, and that is consuming calcium supplements or dairy products. Consuming dairy products creates an anemia in children called Heiner's syndrome, described in the 1920s. And they could not correct, this was a life-threatening anemia in little kids. They couldn't correct this by giving the kids blood transfusions, iron supplements. They finally figured out they had to take the kids off the milk. The dairy protein was causing bleeding in the bowel. And the milk was providing calcium and phosphorus, which complexed the iron in the bowel and made it not absorbable. So you ate iron from beef or green beans. If you took a glass of milk along with it, or a couple of Tums, the calcium and phosphorus grabs a hold of all the iron, or a good share of the iron in the other food, and makes it non-absorbable. So get off the dairy. Stop taking the calcium supplements. Look for a source of bleeding too.
Great. Thank you. You know, I know you touched on this briefly when we talked about Durrell earlier, but people keep writing about their blood sugar, Do I need to get thin before I can eat all the carbs without raising my blood sugar?
Absolutely not. You know, I would like you to go back and look at the lecture we did last month. The one I did with Michael Greger, look under Defense of the Potato, or McDougall and Greger and Potato on YouTube, and look at that lecture. I went through a whole section about how sugar makes insulin work better. I showed you all the basic research. There is none other. Okay. I talked to you about Shirley Sweeney's work. In 1927, he took his medical students who were willing to go on very stringent diets, and he fed them a high sugar diet. It was licorice and candy bars and table sugar and honey, a high sugar diet. And then he did a glucose tolerance test on them. In other words, he checked the sugar hours after they ate. None of them were diabetic. Took the same students and fed them a diet high in fat, olive oil, lard, butter, very high fat diet. And every single one of his students, healthy 22-year-old students, on average, became diabetic. In 1920. His professor, the head of this whole thing, the head of diabetes, is a guy named Percival Hemsworth. He published in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. His publication in the British Medical Journal should have stopped the argument. It was published in 1940 in the British Medical Journal, where he showed that in patients, when you fed them a high-fat diet, they developed very high blood sugars. A high sugar diet, normal or low. Should have ended since 1940. No one should be discussing this. James Anderson, the head of endocrinology at University of Kentucky in the 1970s, he published diets where they used a high complex carbohydrate diet, showed that 90% of people who followed a high sugar diet got off their pills, and at least 70% got off their insulin, those that were type 2 diabetic. Dr. Brunzell at the University of Washington in 1978 published an article in the New England Journal of Medicine, where he took type 2 diabetics and he fed them a synthetic diet of sugar, dextrans and multidextrans, simple sugars. 45% of the calories in the baseline group were sugar. And then he doubled the sugar and made it 85% sugar. Every aspect of their diabetes got better. Fasting blood sugar, 24-hour sugar, insulin levels. This was all published in 1978. One of Dr. Greger's mentors, as well as mine, is a guy named Walter Kempner, Duke University, the rice diet. His diet was 93% sugar. It was made of white rice, fruit juice, and table sugar. And he was curing type 2 diabetes at the same rate that I do, 100%.
I think people are scared because here's another comment. Newly diabetic, starches cause very high blood sugar levels, says, who wrote this one, Jamie, is it safe to eat this way to manage diabetes? Because their doctors are telling them it's not okay.
Well, then you ought to listen to somebody else, because you're not better. And, you know, if you can't do it on your own, we'll take care of you. There's places open in January. I told you we're sold out in November. Come to the 12-day program. We'll take care of you. We'll get you better. You'll get off a lot of medication and your blood sugars will get better. And or, nice. You know, as I told you, there's something called type 1.5 diabetes. If what you're looking for is controlling numbers, I've got pills, I've got shots. I can make your numbers anything I want. I'm a doctor. I can make your blood sugar 20. But I can only get you well one way, and that's fixing the problem. And the problem's the food. If you want to be cured 100% of the time of type 2 diabetes, you go tell your doctor I said that. You go tell any of my opponents I said that. You tell anybody who wants to come up against me and tell me I can't cure 100% of type 2 diabetics with the approach I take. You're not going to find anybody, because not going to be a good half hour for them. I guarantee you, because I know the science. And plus, the science came before me. I also have the experience of 12,000 patients that have taken care of over 46 years. So, that personal experience of taking care of real life people and knowing what happens, having the disappointments and the successes. I've earned the right to talk the way I do toward you. And I know that the science is solidly behind me. There's no contention about what I'm telling you. There's some manipulation, but I'll show you where it goes. I'll show you how they tricked you. I've been at this a long time. I know the tricks too.
Okay, so here's another one we get about total cholesterol. And this is from John. And he says he's 74. He is not overweight. And he attended your advanced study weekend in September 2015. That was a good one. I spoke at that one. And whole food plant-based since. He said recent labs total cholesterol was 236. LDL was 158 and HSCRP 0.3, no issues. He says, all of us do not have dramatic drops in cholesterol like the Star McDougallers. What do you suggest instead of taking statins?
That's right. Our average cholesterol drop in 7 days is 22 milligrams per deciliter, which is about 4 international. Let's see. Anyway, it's divide by 38 and you'll get the international units. So it's about 4/10 of an international unit. We get that in 7 days. We documented that in 1,700 people. But some people drop their cholesterol 50 points or 80 points. That means some didn't drop them at all, or maybe even had a rise in cholesterol. This sometimes happens. There are people based upon genetics or maybe damage to their system that it did prior to changing their diet who can't get their cholesterol down to an ideal level. Now I know this doesn't happen in many people, like, for example, in Japan in post-World War II. Essentially everybody had a cholesterol of 150, plus their age. 150 plus their age, that's what they found. So, there are populations of millions of people where everybody runs a low cholesterol. But there are some people, I don't know, like I mentioned, genetic reasons, bad luck, previous damage, that can't get their cholesterol down.
You can talk about me.
You can talk about you.
I'll talk about me. I can't get my cholesterol down below 150. And I couldn't eat any more perfect.
Yeah, but the other thing I ought to mention is that she and I both had heart scans about 35 years ago. That's where they took an x-ray and they peer into your heart arteries. I remember the lady brought us into the room, the technician, and she goes, well, I think we'd better start with you first, John. She says, you're in big trouble. My calcium score was over 300. I said, yeah, but I had a stroke when I was 18. It should be at least that, considering the way I used to eat. I have a family history of heart disease. And then she looked at Mary and she says, yours is perfectly clean. So, the blood cholesterol level, it's the same thing. I take care of many patients, and I've had a few patients that have had cholesterols, women in particular, cholesterols in the 350 range. And we've studied them. We've done heart scans on them, which is as good as an autopsy, but a lot more desirable. We found their arteries are baby clean. So it doesn't surprise me that your cholesterol wouldn't come down. That's the average. If you want your numbers to come down, I can make them as low as you want. I'm a doctor. You want your cholesterol 40? I got statins. I can make it 40. You want to prevent heart disease? This is the problem with statin drugs, is the studies show that they have an extremely tiny reduction in risk of dying of heart disease. Like in the matter of hours you save by taking these drugs. And here they get these tremendous drops in the blood cholesterol, but when they don't see it in terms of mortality, which is what you really care about, or when they do angiograms on people. This is very disturbing for the statin industry. When they started doing angiograms and checking for reversal of artery disease when they treated people with statins, they saw no reversal. And they started with the excuse that, okay, it doesn't reverse the plaques. It just makes them more stable, which you couldn't prove or disprove based upon the evidence out there. So the statin industry knows that the arteries don't get healthier. They know that the reduction in death from heart disease is almost none. You want to find out what the actual death rate is, read my May 2003 newsletter called Who Should Take Statins? John Abersom, who's a friend of mine, who's the doctor who's hired all over the world when a lawsuit is involved with statin drugs. He's the expert. You'll meet John Abersom on this particular newsletter and in a video I did of him, May 2003. May 2013. Who Should Be Taking Statins by John Abersom, May 2013. Anyway, numbers, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, you're following false gods. You use these numbers just for kind of a peripheral thing, you know? Just like when you go to school, you get passionate about a subject, you want to be an archaeologist and so on, but you got only a C in archaeology. But you turned out to be a world expert in archaeology. You wrote the textbooks as you got older, and that C was unimportant. Your total cholesterol is not that important.
Well, that's what I wanted to prove. I've been eating this way for
50 years. 50 years,
you know?
Since 1977.
My arteries are clean, but my cholesterol is not 120
No.
or lower than that, or 150.
But mine is.
But his is.
Yeah.
And he's got.
I had a stroke.
You had, yeah.
I definitely have a lot of old lesions based on my heart scan that was done 35 years ago. I wasn't worried about the old lesions because I stopped making new ones, the ones that kill. So, I have the history of a stroke and the history of a positive heart scan, and I run a cholesterol. I used to run a cholesterol of 338. That was when I was 22 years old. Now my cholesterol, I would check my cholesterol on spot anytime you see me on the street if you have a needle. And I bet you'll find my cholesterol running between 137 and 151. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
I've had it checked,
Yeah,
I've had it checked 10 or 20 times over the last 20 years. In fact, just recently I had it checked at Kaiser. It was like 140 or something.
Yeah.
So I got good numbers. But, I want to stay alive. So I would rather you hear that I follow a really healthy diet and take good care of myself, because that's really what's important. Stop following the numbers.
Mm.
But they sell drugs. They get you scared. That's why cholesterol is so important. It's not that anybody dies of high cholesterol. No one dies of high cholesterol. No one dies of high blood sugar. No one dies of high blood pressure. They don't die of these signs of disease. They die of the underlying disease, which is rotten arteries. If you go in and knock down the signs rather than correcting the problem, guess what? You just die with good-looking signs. It's like when you drive down the road, okay, and you see this sign that says bridge out. And you go up there and you knock down the signs with a hatchet, okay? And then you keep going. Got rid of the sign.
I like that one.
All right.
You have so many nice comments of people that have read your book, reversed arthritis, lost weight. People want to know what Mary is making for Thanksgiving this year.
She's not. Or you mean
I'm not. I'm probably not, because this year we're going over to.
Yeah, but how about making sweet potatoes?
Oh, well, I'll make. I did that last year. I make mashed sweet potatoes, and just the orange yams. I bake them until they're really soft, and then I scrape out all the insides and make a big, huge casserole of sweet potatoes and maple syrup, a little bit of maple syrup.
Oh, you're so bad.
A little bit of maple syrup. But that just gives it a little bit extra taste.
Yeah, we're going over to our son, Heather's brother, to his house for dinner. They live in Portland where we live, and they'll make the dinner.
But I used to make stuffed pumpkin, and I would save a pumpkin or buy a special pumpkin, at least this big, around Thanksgiving time or around Halloween time, and save it for my special pumpkin. I like the ghost white ones, and I like the light blue ones because the flavor of the flesh is different. And I would make holiday stuffing, which is bread stuffing. And actually, if you want to know all about it, on the website somewhere, there's if you put in the search box, put in holiday recipes, you'll get a whole 12-page list of how to shop and what to make and what I used to do every Thanksgiving. I don't have to do that anymore because I have somebody else to do it for me now.
But this is such a detailed list. It tells you when to do things, what to prepare ahead of time.
What to buy and everything.
We've been putting out that list for about 20 years with modifications. And so you can get it on the website. Just look up Thanksgiving holiday meals.
And the recipes are right there too.
Yeah, the recipes are there too.
We should live stream from Craig's house while you guys are eating. People would watch that. I'm not kidding.
Really. But we deserve a little private time.
I know. So Dr. McDougall, I want to respect your time so we can go.
We're doing fine.
We can, okay. So you've never shied away from controversy. So should I ask, of course, the controversial COVID type question or not? All right. Well, so I will. And guys, please send them in advance. It's time we give you priority. This is from Jack. We've been eating whole food plant-based for 10 years and are in our late 70s. We took 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine in February. Do you advise taking the booster?
We have ours scheduled for Wednesday of this week.
So I'm guessing the answer is yes then.
Yeah. Hey, look, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the wash water, ladies and gentlemen. All our family is fully immunized, except for flu shots. We don't take flu shots because they scientifically don't work. And you can read about why I don't recommend flu shots. You can read it on the website. Just put in flu in the question section. And but the rest of the immunizations, if I could get a vaccination for smallpox, I would administer it to my grandkids, my children, ourselves. Look, there have been 3 things that have reduced the incidence of disease in human beings throughout all of history. Only 3. Better sanitation, better nutrition, and vaccinations. That's it. Not antibiotics, not anything else that I can think of. Just those 3 things. Why would I abandon other principles and not take advantage of technology? It makes no sense. The viruses don't sound like they're perfect. I don't want to represent myself as anything close to an expert on these vaccinations. I'm just like you. I'm a consumer. Done a little bit of reading, kind of follow the research on it. But what I understand is these are better than not. And in addition, I try and push, but nobody's listening, the idea that you need to eat well, because it's people who have comorbid factors. You watch the folks on the news all around the world in the ICU who are dying of COVID. They're obese. Look at them. It's almost a prerequisite that you need to be obese. There are exceptions. Obese to end up on a respirator, end up in the hospital, end up dying. So I wish we could get the message out that, as important as the vaccinations are a good diet to get rid of the comorbid factors. That's what we're all about, is our program, the McDougall program, gets rid of comorbid factors like diabetes, like we talked about with the gentleman at the beginning of the show, Durrell. We cure those things. If you want to set yourself up for death and hospitalization and spending 2 weeks on a ventilator, drowning in your own fluids, then ignore your health. You want to have the best chance possible of not ending up in this dire situation, whether or not you catch the virus. Then you get vaccinated. And you eat a good diet.
It also protects other people.
Yeah, it does.
But you know, one of the things that I mean, again, I'm not a doctor and I don't even like to discuss this because it has created such division even in the plant-based world. But my understanding is that people that are vaccinated can still spread the Delta variant. They have no symptoms. Is that correct?
That's what I understand too. I get that from the daily news also. Is that people who are protected from the virus in terms of vaccination still get infected with the virus. In fact, there are cases every day. You know, Jen Psaki, it's just today, she announced that she's infected with COVID. You know, Joe Biden's press secretary, she got the vaccination. You know, and you hear over and over again, people who get the vaccination also catch the virus, but it doesn't put them in a dire situation. They're able to defend and repair as well. You know, that's why younger people have less chance ending up in the hospital because they're healthier in general. As people get older, they get sicker. Why do they get sicker? Well, you know, because old is associated with deterioration and the end of life. That's the way it is. And plus, you've accumulated more and more years of shoveling poison in your system as you get older. And young people, they look better. Youth looks good, doesn't it? Youth looks good because youth is healthy and we're attracted to health. Mm. But
well,
old people
old is not, Mary.
Yeah, Mary, she looks good.
But my mom used to say getting old is not for sissies.
You know,
that's true. I would have to say, I'd have to agree.
Yeah, it's nothing we really planned for or, you know, hurried up to rush towards, but now that we're there, and I think everybody agree that we're now classified as
elderly,
pleasantly mature.
All right. Well, here's a question about my favorite topic, weight loss. Named Fluffy. Is there any way to lose weight if you have high prolactin? I have a large pituitary tumor and am on a dopamine agonist. I have hypoglycemia and high insulin now and can't eat carbs because they make me crash.
You know, you need to get another teacher because with what you believe now, you will not solve your problem. I've taken care of people with hyperprolactinemias, in other words, tumors of the pituitary gland, you know, several over the years, and they never had any trouble losing weight. I can't see any reason that I can't see any reason that the diet of a human being would have changed just because of the development of this pituitary tumor, which, by the way, was likely due to the high-fat diet you consumed over the years. You know, there's some evidence to that effect. It all got burned up in my basement in the wildfire, but I had some research papers showing that, and you might be able to find it, that pituitary adenomas, look up pituitary adenomas and high-fat diets. I think you'll at least find some animal experiments supporting this. But anyway, it doesn't make any sense that you would all of a sudden stop eating the diet for human beings because you broke your leg, or you have a pituitary tumor, or you got in a car accident, or you got hepatitis. You know, it makes no difference at all. It's like you take a horse and a horse breaks its leg on the track. Do you put it on cat food? You need to rethink what's going on. And any of you out there who are not getting better, it's because you're listening to the wrong messenger. As Dr. Anthony Lim, our medical director, says, he was taught to manage disease. I don't do that anymore. If you're tired of being managed, you got to take the cure. I mean, if we haven't made a case here for you in the few times that you've listened to Mary and I and the excellent education you've gotten with AJ over her daily instruction, if we haven't made an impression on you, I know we have because you still attend. You go listen to somebody else. There are a whole bunch of people out there that teach things that I don't believe are true, not just in medicine, but also in politics. But I'm not going to go there.
Okay, good.
Dr. McDougall, do you have an eidetic memory? Because when people ask you a question, you'll immediately say it's in my May 2008 newsletter. I mean, how can you remember?
The reason I love, first of all, you remember the things you love. And I really love what I do. And for me, entertainment is like getting ready for this talk for you today, looking up the various studies on the effect of various components of food on estrogen. And by the way, I found out that acute ingestion raises estrogen levels, but chronic use of alcohol, it's quite controversial as to whether that makes a difference in estrogen levels. And there's some evidence that says that alcohol consumption will reduce your risk of getting fractures, and others that say it'll increase the risk. So anyway, I know you were sitting there waiting. He's going to talk about my wine, but I really enjoy. For me, it's fun, and it took me at least, just for this little bit of 20 slides I showed you today, that took me 3 days. For the preparation I did with Michael Greger, I spent at least a week on that. For a typical newsletter, I would spend every month, a week to 2 weeks, working 8, 10, 16 hours a day to make sure I had it right. And that's why when I go back and read a book like McDougall's Medicine of Challenging Second Opinion that I wrote 37 years ago, 1985, that came out, I don't have to make any corrections because I did it right the first time. The truth is the truth. The truth don't change. If you find the truth, if that's your goal, is to find the truth, and you put it down on paper, you don't have to go back and correct yourself or apologize years later. And I know that's one of the criticisms I get is, why are you teaching the same old stuff? Well, because it's true. You want me to teach you the earth is flat?
But you do have a special memory.
Yeah, but only for things that
No.
I really like.
He sure remembered the one time I insulted him, and I haven't heard the end of it in the last 7 years.
You did insult, but you taught me a new word too, and now I know what a misogynist is.
Oh my God!
I didn't know I was one.
I think it was. Oh my God! I'll never get to the end of that.
I'm serious. I had never heard that word before.
Wow, it's
Or I'd forgotten it or something. It was.
I'm trying to remember. I was upset. It was.
You could have called me a Halloween monster. I don't know.
No, I think it was at one of the advanced study weekends.
Yeah, I was sitting in the crowd, and you were up on stage.
It was 2011, and I was offended because it wasn't when I spoke because you didn't come to my presentation.
Oh, well, I had patience. I had to see.
I know, but it hurt my feelings. I'm sorry.
Again, that's one of the mistakes I think I made, was that I should have not seen patients when I was, and I would also do interviews of the guests. And so I kept myself too busy. I should have attended everybody's program. You're right. I deserve it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry about that. If you could just forgive me, I would have
taught me a new word.
Oh my God, you're hilarious.
I always thought that I always thought that I liked girls.
Oh my God, this is so funny. All right, so
I didn't know that I hated them or whatever that word means.
He still doesn't know exactly what the word means.
I'll look it up when we get off the.
Oh my God, this is too fun. All right. So again, another person, they're so worried about the numbers. And like you said, nobody dies from the numbers. But Catherine says, how long does it take for blood sugars to come down after beginning this diet? Are there people that will still need to go on medication, even eating this way?
Yes, absolutely. I told you about them. They have type 1.5 diabetes. Those are people who have partial pancreatic insufficiency. They need to be treated with medication. I use long-acting insulin because the pancreas is partially inefficient. It's partially destroyed. Not enough so that you end up in the hospital with diabetic ketoacidosis and you die, but bad enough so the sugars don't come down perfect. If the sugars worry you, again, I'm a doctor. I can make your sugar anything you want. And I kind of half jokingly say to you that I will prescribe for you long-acting insulin if your mother-in-law or your doctor worries about, or you worry about your numbers. I treat psychological, emotional, psychiatric type problems, and that's worrying about your numbers. I'm a full-fledged, well-rounded doctor. Anyway, I can't say it enough. Yes, you're absolutely right. Sometimes but who cares? What you want to do is live well and live long. And you got to, you know how the saying goes, you correct the things you can correct and you try and put aside the things you can't. You know, when you spend 30, 40, 50 years abusing yourself with your fork and spoon, don't you expect that there's going to be some problems left over? Anyway, what you want to accomplish, just say your blood sugar didn't get normal. Then you die with high blood sugar at 90 years old, with your eyes working and your kidneys working. How would that be? I hope you. Do you think she should say that I have a warped sense of humor? You got a name for that, called warped sense of humor?
I don't think they understand your humor.
Probably not. I can't control myself. I'm too old to change.
That's okay. We love you the way you are. And for those that don't, you don't care, because you've always said, I'd rather be hated than ignored. And I would actually rather be ignored, but
but you can see the value to that. I mean, and that's the way I've been dealt with most of my career, is I've been ignored. And that's been more painful than being hated.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate, because it's,
you get to get on the stage with your contestants, either in writing or in a Zoom talk like we're having today. You know, it's a great thing, I think, to contest with people, as long as you do it in a professional way. You contest with them and you show the facts, and this is the way it is, and the listener can decide who they believe. Or better yet, do a test. Because there are all kinds of things that are going to be coming your way as far as supplements and magic pills and magic diets and so on. And you don't know how to sort them out. So do the following things. First of all, when you're subjected to a new miracle treatment, say to yourself, will this hurt me? I mean, if it's going to hurt me, I'm not going to do it. So it would be safe to do a test. And then you decide how much time, how much effort, how much money is it going to take me to perform a test? And if it comes up positive, in other words, it's time efficient, effort efficient, and cost efficient, give it a try. But only give it a try for a period of time. I mean, if things work, they work right away. I showed you our results in 7 days. We get nearly 90% of people to reduce or stop their diabetic and blood pressure medications in 7 days. And as I often say, if you have a problem and it's not resolved by 4 months, it's not going to get better, except for weight loss. You may have a year and a half's worth of fat to lose. But almost always, if somebody has inflammatory arthritis or inflammatory bowel disease, or coronary artery disease, or even type 2 diabetes, except they have to continue to lose the weight to get full benefits, they'll see the benefits within 4 months. And I ask you to think about this as a realistic time based upon the healing time that occurred in your life from other injuries. How about when you broke your arm? How long did it take for it to heal? Come on now. Or your kid broke his arm. How long did it take to, they were thinking about taking the cast off in 3 weeks. In 3 months, you were out playing baseball. If you can't get better in 4 months, you're not going to get better. The body's ability to heal is phenomenal. You just to survive, you can't afford the time of being relegated to incapacity. Somebody will kill you, or at least steal your business, or your wife. You got to be tough. You got to be strong. You can't lay around in a hospital bed. 4 months, you'll get better. If you're not better in 4 months, go on to another guru.
Well, I think the reason some people ignore you, Dr. McDougall, is because you threaten their financial interest and you threaten the status quo, because the people that matter, that's what I loved about your birthday tribute. Look at all the people that don't ignore you, that spoke about you.
Well, those pioneers out there are up for the fight too. I can't imagine Esselstyn or Ornish or Campbell feeling any different than I do. They're ready for the fight. When you have the truth on your side, it's fun.
Yeah, they're not going to change their mind.
No, but you see these gentlemen changing their mind. You think Walter Kempner would have changed his mind, or Roy Swank, or Nathan Pritikin, or Dennis Burkett, my mentors, you think they would, yeah, you got to be kidding. In fact, my challenge to anybody out there that thinks that they would like to develop a new way of treating problems. First, I want you to study the work of Walter Kempner from Duke University, who taught the rice diet for 7 decades at Duke University. You learn about that. And then you learn about the work of Nathan Pritikin. Read his research, and then you tell me what the truth is. That's where I learned the truth. And by the way, papers of both of these pioneers are on my website for you to get for free. They're almost lost to history. And I was able to get the scientific papers of both Nathan Pritikin and Walter Kempner. And I had them copied, somewhat illegally, but they're still on my website. And they're there for you to enjoy for free. So study Walter Kempner and study Nathan Pritikin. Read everything I wrote about them and everything they wrote about their research. And then you come and tell me how to treat patients. You tell me about diet therapy. You tell me about your nonsense about some good fat, or about how McDougall and Ornish and Campbell, et cetera, they're old farts. They missed it. They don't. You should listen to us new guys. Excuse me. I can hardly wait. You can tell. Come on, AJ.
Well, there is a young faction of newer vegan doctors that say you old guys don't read the research and they know better that oil is good for heart disease and all this kind of stuff.
Until they read the basic research, I'm not even going to start to listen to them, because I know that these two pioneers got it right. And they don't I bet if you ask any of them if they know the work of Walter Kempner, they'd say no. Dean Ornish, heard of the guy. Well, do you know what he really says?
You mean Nathan Pritikin?
Nathan Pritikin, yeah. Nathan Pritikin. Dean Ornish, most people know him. And Dean does good work too. But Nathan Pritikin, do you know him? Well, I heard about him. He's some health food nut in California. I was around in the 70s and 80s. Well, you got a lot more to learn, ladies and gentlemen. So anyway.
They still have a rant. They still have a Pritikin Center in Florida, and I tried to get them on the show, but they didn't want to. And I know they do include animal products. Is anybody using the Kempner diet at all these days? Because that would be fascinating to see.
Dr. John McDougall does.
No, but I mean, just rice though.
No, they don't. For political reasons, it was at Duke for 7 decades. And for 2 decades, it was the main financial support for Duke University. They made most of the money for that university. And because of political reasons, and those are people who believe in a moderate approach, believe that you're too stupid, you're too disinterested to do it right. So we'll put a little compromise in there, a little chicken, little defatted beef, a little skim milk, because you're too stupid, you're too disinterested to do the program right. They took over the politics at Duke. That's what happened. And so they've been gone for the last 2 decades. If you want to meet the last 2 people who supported the Kempner diet after Walter Kempner retired, they're Robert Rosati and Frank Nealon. And you'll see interviews of both of these gentlemen in my December 2013 newsletter. Walter Kempner never gave an interview. In fact, he would not even let his picture taken. But his two followers, the 2 men who worked with him for 20, 30 years, who knew him better than anybody else. I got live interviews of those 2 men, Robert Rosati and Frank Nealon. Go listen to them. See what they have to say about Walter Kempner.
Yeah, that would have been so interesting. Okay, so this is from Kim. Could you please ask Dr. McDougall? I'm concerned about getting appropriate levels of K2 in my diet. Whole food plant-based eating takes care of K1 in abundance. However, there's not a lot of information about K2 without eating animal products in natto. Is tempeh a good enough source? It seems B12 and DEHA, maybe she means DHEA, aren't the only vitamins that are a little harder for us to come by. I hope you don't get hold to stop worrying about minor things as an answer. I'm interested in keeping my bones strong, and apart from weight-bearing exercises and a sound diet, this seems to be a red flag. Do you worry about K2 for people?
No, I don't think you should worry about K2. Vitamin K comes from plants. The the conversion to K2 occurs with the intestinal bacteria. You have all the K2 you need on a vegan diet. You don't have to worry about it because, well, you just don't. As far as the B12 goes, we've talked about that. We add a non-animal source of B12 to the diet. As far as the essential fats go, that's nonsense. You get easy enough, efficient enough conversion of alpha linoleic acid to DHA and EPA by the normal mechanisms of the human body. You don't need to put a fish in between. It's not necessary. That's what the research says. You know, these are some of the things that I've asked you, or I've asked some of my colleagues to debate me in a friendly debate over. This would be great topics of discussion as to whether you need these things or not. Pick a slew of things that were described by this questioner as minor but important, and I'll discuss them. The human being is a starchivore. And that's what we do best on. Adding animal foods, be they secretions of animals, i.e. milk, or their parts, i.e. meat and organs, does not make the situation any better, does not improve on human nutrition. No matter how much money was involved to convince you that it's necessary to eat meat to get protein and milk to get calcium. Everybody knows that. They still know that. My mother knew that. That's why she raised me on meat and dairy. That's why I had a stroke. That's why I used to be 100 pounds heavier than I am now. That's why I used to have a cholesterol 338. That's why I had terrible stomach pains and horrible constipation during most of my adult childhood life. Because my mother believed that she needed to feed, of utmost importance, foods with calcium and protein, i.e. dairy and meat. Anyway,
Yeah. Well,
starch-based diet with fruits and vegetables is the ideal diet for human beings. If you add any animal food, you will detract from the nutritional value of that diet.
well, people tend to worry about deficiencies much more than the real problem, which is excesses.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it comes out of a couple of things, AJ. One is we had World War II, and we were able to develop the atomic bomb. And so we were able to destroy human life, all life on this planet. So we thought if we could develop the atomic bomb, we could do anything. And so there was advertisements about look to Monsanto for the future in terms of health and everything else. The other thing that happened is 100 years earlier is we discovered the cure for scurvy, beriberi, pellagra, in terms of vitamin supplements. And of course, all those diseases exist because you were not eating a starch-based diet with fruits and vegetables, or you were eating a refined diet. The reason you get beriberi is because they strip the bran off of the rice, and in the bran is thiamine, vitamin B1. And so when you take the bran off the rice, you make white rice, you set somebody up for beriberi. Was that because rice causes beriberi, or human interference in the manufacture of the rice causes beriberi? Tryptophan. You get pellagra from deficiency of tryptophan. This occurred only after the processing of corn. Scurvy occurred when sailors went out to sea with the non-perishable staples of rice and legumes, of grains and legumes. The perishable part of their food supply was fruits and vegetables, perishable fruits and vegetables. After a few days into the trip, all those were gone. You need to have fruits and vegetables to get enough vitamin C to avoid scurvy. Well, if they'd have brought potatoes along, they'd have been just fine, because potatoes are known as the anti-scurvy vegetable. So see, it's only doing something bizarre that you develop deficient diseases at all. And yes, they did correct them with pills. But just because you can cure scurvy with a pill, or beriberi with a pill, a vitamin, doesn't mean you can cure breast cancer or heart disease or et cetera with a pill. A pill deficiency is not the problem. In the case of these diseases I just mentioned, it was a deficiency created by manufacturing and incorrect behavior. So we corrected that by correcting the deficiency. These aren't diseases of deficiency. they're diseases of food poisoning, which I used to call diseases of excess, but I think diseases of food poisoning is more appropriate and also a more actionable thought. Because you know what you do with poisons, right?
You don't take them.
Animal foods and oils are poisons. Olive oil is a poison. Anybody want to debate that?
Well, I wish you would, but I don't think some of these people are worthy to debate you that are promoting oil.
I don't care, and I would only do it for a learning experience, because I've researched this enough. I know the data enough, but you just look at the presentation I did on the last show last month with Dr. Greger. You tell me I don't know my stuff. You tell me I don't know how to do research. You don't tell me I don't know how to put an argument together after you watch that hour. You tell me I'm too old, huh? No way.
Nice.
I think the brain is actually better than it used to be.
You know your stuff. So from Carol, a friend of mine was just diagnosed with lupus at age 70. She says all her joints ache and she's miserable. I told her about eliminating all dairy and that may help. Did I say the right thing? Yes, you did. If somebody just picked one food group, look, I'm not gonna eliminate both meat and dairy. What would you ask me to eliminate? It would be the dairy foods, because they're the ones that more commonly cause these diseases of molecular mimicry. They're called autoimmune diseases where the body attacks itself. They're the ones that confuse the immune system, so that the immune system attacks the dairy protein, but also attacks your pancreas. It's all worked out. The 17 amino acids that cross-react between the insulin-producing cells of the pancreas and the beta-carotene segment on the milk protein have been identified. We know what they are. In 1992. Forgotten because guess what? Why would we bring it to anybody's attention? Why would we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on advertising to let you know about it? Oh, let's teach you about GERD. Or let's teach you about bone mineral density. Or let's teach you about blood pressure. Or let's teach you about cholesterol. Why do you think these campaigns exist? You think that the drug companies are out there trying to do this for your good? They're businesses, ladies and gentlemen. Grow up. These campaigns, these educational campaigns, teaching you about GERD and blood pressure and cholesterol and good grief, now they have irritable bowel syndrome. That's some of that nonsense. I'm learning about things that were only rare discussions in medical school. I'm learning about drugs. They sell drugs on TV that counteract the side effects of other drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's only, why do they sell these drugs? Because they're patentable, and they sell them for tens of thousands of dollars. The MS drugs, the average cost for the medication for a year for multiple sclerosis drugs is like $85,000. That does not include the alcohol swabs, the needles, or the syringes, or the visits to the doctor, just the drug. Why are they advertising these things on TV now, these orphan drugs, these drugs for these very rare, you didn't even hear about ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease up until recently. Why are they doing that? It's because they can sell the drugs to the patients for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. That's why. You think otherwise?
Well,
grow up.
Look at Botox. For years, Botox was, the only reason I ever thought of Botox was if you wanted to inject something and get rid of your wrinkles. And now they advertise Botox for migraines.
Yeah, and it works too, by the way. I know.
It's amazing.
That's just business. Again, I'm not trying to belittle you or say anything that you shouldn't realize up front. This is just business. There's no conspiracy. Nobody's out trying to hurt you. They're just interested in power and money. Mostly money.
Yep.
I think of politics and I think power.
Well, I will go all day. We can do a McDougall marathon. So you're going to have to tell me when to stop because the
All
questions.
right, well, you guys can hang up every time you want. I can't tell how many people are on here.
Well, let's see. Right now, we've got on YouTube right now at this moment 332 watching, and on Facebook about 63. So we have about 400. Is the number?
You know what? I can never get an audience that big.
You've had up to 1,000. I mean, on other ones, we do have more people watching on the replay, but and I'm asking them to share the broadcast so that more people will join. But
AJ, that presentation we did last month, the one that I asked you.
Oh, you got a lot of views on your 35,000.
38,000 views, and you got over 12,000.
Yeah, that's amazing. It was a very good presentation. If you guys haven't seen it, I'll link below. I
would encourage you to watch it. I've gotten no criticism yet from anybody, anywhere, any place, except it's kind of interesting is that the comments that people make. There are a lot of nasty people out there.
Oh my gosh, I know. I don't even go through my comments because they're so hurtful. I have somebody else do them because people say mean stuff,
I fortunately it doesn't bother me because I know where they come from.
I wish I could be like you.
Oh well, you have other qualities that make you much more approachable. You see, when you're like me, nobody wants except you.
Yeah, Mary, how do you do it? You're like
put up with him.
Yeah.
Well, this is. I'll tell you why. I'm going to give you the secret. Okay. I'm going to give you the secret. As my parents told me when I was growing up in life, I had some phenomenal parents, as you can imagine, and they told me that Johnny, you have to be honest. Every time in life, you must be honest because that'll serve you well. And about that time, I was looking for a mate. Didn't realize it, just my hormones did. And about that time, I was, marriageable. And I met a lot of young women who were very nice people, good to be with and everything. But I never loved them. And I never wanted to be with them the rest of my life. And I knew that deep down inside. No matter how high the passion got, I knew that. But I met Mary, and immediately, she didn't even take off her surgical mask. I just looked at her eyes, just a couple of words, and I fell in love. And I knew it was the right thing. And the second thing my parents taught me is you must marry a happy person because you're never going to make her happy. They didn't really say that. I could take it that way, that you're never going to make her happy, put it on me. But what they told me was something that's so true. You can't change people. And so if you're going to start out with an unhappy person, a drug addict, an alcoholic, an abuser or whatever, or a nice person, that's the person you're going to be with the rest of your life. So I got lucky. But I used some judgment there. I found a person who, and that's the secret, is she's put up with me more than anybody I can imagine because of the quality of person she is. She just looks at me and goes, "Oh, heck, it ain't Bert." I don't know what you say. I just don't know how you put up with some of the nonsense I deal your way.
It's going to be 50 years in January, right?
That's
February,
right.
January. It's January.
You didn't even know.
That's Mary. Did you have other options?
Oh yeah. I did. I spent my time looking around, and it took me a while to decide that he was the right one.
I think it was years after we got married that she finally decided I was the right one. It wasn't right away. For me, it was love at first sight. For her, it was like, well, okay, I can put up with him for a while.
That is hilarious. You guys are something. Oh,
we had a lot of fun. We've always had a tremendous amount of fun together. We left Michigan, moved to Hawaii. That was a big deal for a young couple to do. Took a job as a sugar plantation doctor. That was a big deal. Bought a sailboat, sailed the sailboat all around the Hawaiian Islands. That took quite a person. Raised a family. I mean, we were very fortunate to have a very positive outlook on life. Flew airplanes, that was an adventure you got me into. We're still doing a lot of very adventurous things. Every day's fun.
Scuba diving, which
Oh,
you got me into.
I could never get you windsurfing though.
Oh,
I got
no.
you scuba diving all over the world.
I tried. I fell too often and I didn't know enough about which way the wind was coming. And I got tired of falling and having to pull the sail up.
But you guys never jumped out of a plane, right?
We never
No.
jumped out. I'll tell you what happened is that we did, we were doing an infomercial. Turned out to be within the top 12 infomercials in the country. It was with the same people that did the Juice Man. And that was the #1 infomercial commercial in the country. And we flew home from Seattle, signing the business agreement for us to do this infomercial. And we flew into Santa Rosa Airport, and Mary looked over at the FBO. She says, "I think I'm going to learn how to fly an airplane." I said, "Okay." Then I'm going to.
Well, because the trip, the trip to Seattle was so short, and you had to wait in line, and you had to have your luggage, and you had to go through security, and then you had to wait again. And I thought, well, if we had our own airplane, we could just climb in and fly up there, and there'd be no problem at all.
It was kind of like you said, drive up there, which I just drive in the sky.
That's what I thought it was going to be like, was that you just get in an airplane and drive.
Well, what happened was she got involved, and she, as is necessary, she got involved both feet. That's all she could think about was flying, learning about flying, spending time with the instructor and so on. So for 3 weeks, I lost my wife. Now, I was raised in an airplane family. My dad had a V-tailed Beechcraft Bonanza and had a Global Swift. So I spent my childhood in the right-hand seat of an airplane. I never wanted to fly an airplane, ever. I knew how dangerous and expensive they were. Forget it. But after 3 weeks of being essentially divorced from her life, I decided I either better learn how to fly an airplane or I better find a new wife. And flying an airplane seemed easier. Anyway, we got involved.
I didn't realize it was going to be so difficult with so much learning. I mean, I used to go to the health club where Jack Dixon, our trainer at the 12-day program.
He's still our trainer. He was our personal trainer 50 years ago.
Yeah.
He works for us now.
I used to sit there and I would go to the treadmill and I would take my airplane manual because there was so much to learn. I mean, there are highways in the sky. I didn't know that. And you can only fly in certain areas, and it was a lot to learn.
So anyways, we bought a single engine airplane, a Dakota, and we flew that around for a while. And I thought that would satisfy her, and I didn't want to fly anything more. And then she says, "Oh, Santa Rosa Airport, it gets kind of cloudy. I want to make sure I can land when the clouds are out there. So we need to become IFR rated pilots." I said, okay, we'll do that training. And then she says, I came home one day and she says,
"That's so you can fly through the clouds."
Yeah, so you can fly through the clouds.
You don't need to see the ground.
IFR rating. So anyway, I came home one day and Mary says to me, "You know what I did today?" She says, "I flew a twin engine airplane." I said, "Okay, I'll buy one." So I went out and bought a twin engine airplane, and we flew that for about 5 years. And we flew all over the country. We flew all over the world. We flew down to Mexico, into Canada, all over the country. We were really good pilots. You know why you know that? Because I'm alive.
Yeah.
The joke goes, you don't mix a baron and a doctor. It's sure death. Anybody who's around airplanes knows that, for a doctor, in other words, somebody who has money but not enough time to really learn how to fly well, what they do is they buy this really hot airplane called a baron. And so, I kind of got stuck with that association, a doctor and a baron's dead meat. And I wasn't going to die. And so, like everything in life, Mary and I took it really, really serious, and we learned how to be excellent pilots. We had, each of us, 1,500 hours of flying time. We had over 500 hours of actual IFR time. We'd fly any place in the country. Didn't matter. Once you got in the system, our food factory used to be at the San Francisco airport. And I'd fly down there at least twice a week to do business at the food factory. That's Dr. McDougall's Right Foods, which is still in existence today. In fact, it's in over 8,000 stores. I'd fly down there, and the tower got to know me so well, and my tail number, that once they found out I was in the pattern, They would maneuver me around a little bit, and then they would say to me, 3695 Lima, I realize you're at the beginning of the runway, but can you land? And at 3,000 feet, I threw out my flaps and my gear, and in between two jumbo jets, I landed that airplane twice a week. That's how good we became. You wonder why I'm good as a doctor? I want to tell you, I'm good at everything I do, including staying alive in an airplane. We sold the airplanes many years ago, and we'll never fly again.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's very brave.
boats, airplanes, RVs,
Scuba diving.
scuba diving. I windsurfed for many years. And so we've done a lot together. We've had a great life together. I just can't imagine anybody being as fortunate as at least I have been. Hopefully you'll say the same thing.
I do. I say the same thing.
Well, you guys are very adventurous.
Well, you know, as you say, you started this whole discussion out with, I'd rather be hated than ignored. Well, you know, I'd rather have an adventure than be bored. Life is an adventure, nothing at all. You've heard that saying. And that's the way we've lived, is right on the edge of disaster and success.
Well, you guys have had a wonderful life. Not that you're going anywhere, though.
No.
No, you know, we are feeling so good and in such good shape now that we were planning on dying at around 85, or at least I was. But we're going to live to be 95 now.
Well, why limit it to then? Why not keep going, Dr. Woodruff?
Because the normal lifespan of a human being is 85 years.
Wow.
And that's based on cell doubling times. The human being, you double your cells 52 times, which brings you out to 85 years. Just like every animal, a tortoise lives to be, 125, and a fruit fly lives to be 5 days. Every animal has a lifespan. You want to ask yourself, what's the lifespan of a human being? Well, historically, scientifically, you know, every way you want to look at it, the lifespan of a human being is 85 years on average. Now, fortunately, there are some populations that live longer, like, for example, the Japanese, particularly the Japanese woman. I think they're 87 years for the Japanese woman. So I decided I don't want to believe in those statistics anymore. I guess I'm approaching 85.
That's great. Well, Dr. Ellsworth Wareham lived till almost 106.
Yeah, he did pretty well, didn't he? He was a vegetarian, Seventh-day Adventist, and he did very well.
Last 50 years of his life were vegan. So, and he was doing open heart surgery till, like, his wife said, you have to retire because I need to see you. And he was like 97. I had him on my show. It was one of the greatest moments.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
You know who you also might have on your show is Ann and Larry Wheat.
Well, I love them. Of course I would. They came on your birthday. They were briefly.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They're Ann and Larry. They went with us on all except 2 adventure trips. So they went through on about 35 different adventure trips with us. We took people, groups of 80 to 150 people, to places like Panama. We took them through the Panama Canal, took them to Costa Rica many times, took them to Mardi Gras, down the Amazon, all kinds of Hawaii, all kinds of wonderful places. We had a great time in the adventure trips, and Ann and Larry went through it with almost all of them with us. They owned the most important fancy vegan restaurant in the world.
Millennium.
Called Millennium, yeah.
Well, why don't I invite them on when you come back in December, which instead of the first Monday will be the second Monday because of the summit.
Yeah. Well, I think you could even have them on as a whole show. They're really.
Oh, sure. Oh, I would. We could do both, but I'll contact them.
I use them. I mean, they're in their mid 80s. Actually, Larry's approaching 90.
Yeah, they're sharp as tacks.
I think so.
I'm going to see them in December.
No, anyway, you can ask them, but they look fantastic. Ann and Larry, whenever they would appear in an audience, I would always make them stand up and say, you know, these are the people that I aspire to, and look at what great shape they're in. And now that we're the same age as they were at that time that I was pointing them out, I can point to us and say, you know what, we're doing pretty good.
It's not so bad, huh? Well,
Yeah.
Dr. Daryl Woodruff, our mutual friend, is watching. He says, thank you so much for this extended interview. People are really enjoying it. And I typed in the chat, how long would you guys like me to go? And they said, until they stop talking. So that's a great answer. Well, how about high blood pressure? We talked about a lot of numbers today. So this person is concerned if they could still have a stroke with a BP of 140/60. She says, had high blood pressure since she was 25, medicated since 30, was overweight, became obese, yo-yo dieted, but in her 50s started eating our way for about 10 years, but blood pressure still trending high, probably genetics. She's on chlorothalidone. Is it possible that I could still have a stroke?
The answer is yes. And definitely she's going to die. But the question is, how can she reduce her risk of having a stroke? Chlorothalidone, not hydrochlorothiazide, but chlorothalidone. There's a big difference between the two. And I forget which one you said, whether it was chlorothalidone or hydrochlorothiazide.
The first one, chlorothalidone.
Okay, well, that's the one that I prescribe. And that's the only drug that's been tested that shows a reduction in stroke and heart failure, not heart attacks. It was done on it's called the Veterans Study. It was done on, I believe, 74 people. And it was done in the 1960s. And they showed a reduction in death from people who had malignant hypertension, I mean, really high blood pressure. And they used chlorothalidone. All drugs are based upon the results of chlorothalidone. No one's really ever tested the chances of dying or having a stroke on these various drugs. They just show that they lower blood pressure just like chlorothalidone does. So you're on the right drug. The benefits are little, to say the least. You have something called isolated systolic hypertension, which means the top number is elevated, but the bottom number is low. And you don't even have that. I mean, it should be, the top number should be in the 170 range before I'd start calling you isolated.
Well, she's taking medication, so that would bring it down.
Yeah, that's true. That would bring it down. But if you weren't taking medication, 160 is not high enough to call you isolated. Well, I suppose you could. Let's just say you have isolated systolic hypertension. It means the top number is up, bottom number's down. There's one study that they did where they tested it's published in JAMA, and I could get it for you, but the one study done where they treated people with isolated systolic hypertension with chlorothalidone, and they showed a reduction in stroke, no reduction in heart attack, and no reduction in overall mortality. None. So what they did is they changed the method of dying. In other words, taking the chlorothalidone may have reduced the risk of dying of stroke, but it increased the risk of dying of something else, if chlorothalidone was the agent acting in both situations. Anyway, there's no reduction. That's the problem with high blood pressure treatments, is there's little or no reduction. Well, there's no reduction in death from heart disease. I can tell you that clearly. There's a tiny reduction in stroke, and improvement in survival, it's very limited. Again, don't rely on false gods. What you should be relying on is your own body taking proper care of. That's what makes a difference. The medications are always going to have effects. Some positive, which is what you're buying them for, and always some negative ones, and they always cost money. Anyway, yes, you could have a stroke. Yes, you are going to die. And maybe the chlorothalidone has reduced your risk of dying of a stroke, but it hasn't reduced your risk of dying of overall mortality. Overall risk of death is still the same.
Well, everybody's going to die.
That's the darn thing.
We're all going to die.
Yeah.
She says her calcium score is 0.
Well, that ought to make you more confident. Calcium score of 0. The arteries get inflamed because they get damaged by the products of the fork and spoon. Cholesterol, oxidized cholesterol, saturated fat, they injure the artery walls. Dairy protein. With the people who have the worst atherosclerosis have the highest levels of antibodies directed to dairy protein. This is, again, another case of molecular mimicry, where in some consumers of cow's milk, they make antibodies to the cow's milk protein that attack the inside line of the arteries. And so they get terrible inflammation. Well, so what was I going to tell them?
I don't know.
Where are we going here?
Don't you guys need lunch? Is it lunchtime for you?
No, we're okay. If you want to go on, it's fine.
All right. Well, hey, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. So, Susan has a very similar type of question. but a different drug. She's saying her cardiologist follows an exclusive whole food plant diet and encouraged her to do the same following a heart attack in 2013. And she's done that for 8 years, but he wants her to stay on a blood thinner and low dose statin because she has stents and her cholesterol went up to 206 from 160 when she went off the statins for 2 months. Have you ever had patients where you ask them to stay on their meds in spite of eating the whole food?
Absolutely. I use statin drugs. I treat people at high risk of having a heart attack or stroke with statin drugs. I also use aspirin. I even use baby aspirin even after that glaring negative report came out about a month and a half ago. So I usually treat people at high risk of stroke or heart attack with statin drugs and baby aspirin, and I keep them on blood thinners. Plavix and aspirin are the usual ones that I use. I keep them on blood thinners after they've had a stent. In other words, they've had a piece of bare metal stuck in their arteries that happens to be coated with cancer-eluting drugs. They're called drug-eluting stents. And those stents, because they have a cancer drug embedded in them, they keep the smooth muscle cells from covering up the metal. So the metal lays exposed. When the metal is exposed, because the body doesn't like exposed bare metal, you have a high risk of a clot developing in the artery and of dying of the clot. So what happens is until the smooth muscle cells start covering up the bare metal, you need to have some extra protection. The length of time that you should be on these drugs is called dual platelet therapy. It's called dual platelet therapy. In other words, you're on aspirin and say Plavix. The length of time you need to take them is 3 to 12 months after the stent is placed. Why? Because after 3 months, you no longer have a drug-eluting stent. All the cancer drug is eluted out. Now you're dealing with a bare metal stent, which has a whole set of risk of problems. And one thing the bare metal stent is, it allows itself to be covered up by these smooth muscle cells. Anyway, that's more complicated than I probably explained it in simplicity to you. It's just, yes, I use these drugs. I'm a real doctor. I got a prescription pad. I'm not going to do anything foolish. For your sake or my sake, why should I put myself up for criticism? If it's going to be a benefit to you, do it. And that's the way I treat people who have a high risk of having a heart attack or stroke, and the way I treat people who have had the stent put in. I keep them on dual platelet antitherapy drugs, aspirin and Plavix, for about 3 months.
Great, thank you.
And AJ, I always feed them a good diet. That never changes. It's just like somebody was asking about their pituitary tumor. Do they need to be on a different diet? Well, hey, when you have a stent put in your arteries, you don't change your diet. You're still a human being. You shouldn't be. Oh, you know what they do is they give fish oil to people sometimes to thin their blood to prevent a heart attack. Well, all the studies that I'm aware of that have come out in the last 10 years show that taking fish oil does not reduce the risk of dying overall. It increases your risk of bleeding dramatically. And it's not recommended for you to take fish oils. I have people who take fish oils who, when they wipe their butt, they bleed. These are very potent drugs, especially when you take aspirin and fish oil together, which many of you are on to prevent heart disease, or after your heart surgery, you're on fish oil and aspirin. Be careful. These are potent. Yes, they thin the blood, but they set you up for bleeding to death.
Wow. Here's something I haven't heard of, but you would probably know. From Mary, do you have any lifestyle recommendations that could alleviate or cure plasma cell vulvitis or lichen planus?
Oh, lichen planus. Lichen planus. That's a skin condition as I remember it. And I've taken care of some people with lichen planus. I can't remember how well they did, though.
But she said vulvitis besides.
But what was it? What was the other condition? Vulvulitis?
Oh boy, I just deleted it. Oh,
Well,
vulvitis, some kind of.
Well, that's vaginal inflammation. That's pain in the vagina, particularly noticed at intercourse. And I've had people I've taken care of with that problem.
So I thought what she meant was the two of them together.
I don't know. I don't notice much connection between a lesion on your leg and your vagina.
Well, I don't know why.
I don't know. Maybe both of them are autoimmune diseases. I think that would be a reason why.
Yeah.
And I would, by the way, I just want you to know, I do remember that the women that I saw who had vaginal pain.
I just found it, plasma cell vulvitis.
You got me into talking about a vagina.
I just wanted to hear you say vagina on the show. That was why.
All I can remember is lichen planus, and a few patients I've taken care of, and I don't remember the outcome. I think it was good though. But the ones with the vagina trouble, they did really good.
No, is there nothing?
I wouldn't forget something like that, AJ.
Is there nothing the McDougall diet cannot do?
Well, pretty much when you talk to me, it's like a broken record. I have to admit that I'm guilty of that. But the thing is I can back up what I have to say, not only by our data, but by those scientific research. And besides that, if there was anything else out there that would help you, you would have taken advantage of it and you wouldn't be asking me for help. If the treatments that you were getting from the oncologist, the diabetologist, the cardiologist, if they were working for you, why would you bother with me? Just eat your hot dogs and burgers and pizzas. They fixed you. Well, they didn't fix you. And that's why you have to bother with us. We're the last corner in town. We're the last person you ask for help. But by that time, you're so beaten down, you're ready to do it. And we get you. We have a compliance rate, and this was studied at Oregon Health and Science University at the medical school in Portland, independent of us.
Just up the hill here.
Just up the hill here. Independent of us, we have a compliance rate of 85% at 1 year. In other words, 85% of people who are taught the program at our 12-day program, the same one you'll take or very similar to the one, better than the one you'll take. The one you'll take on the internet is better than the one that they live in. I've told you that. I really mean it. The results independently are 85% of people are still compliant, still eating the diet at the end of a year. Why? Because the results are so dramatic and the food is so good. And once you get past the idea that you've got to eat a block of dead muscle and a glob of fat covered with a bunch of salt. Once you get over that distraction, then you start really enjoying the food. And within 12 weeks, we do this program for 12 days, AJ, for a reason. And that is, it takes 5 days to really learn everything. It takes 5 days for me or Dr. Lim to get you on a minimal amount of medication, which, as I say, means in 90% of the cases, we have reduced or stopped your diabetic or high blood pressure pills and other medications too, not just those. So, it takes 5 days to teach you that. It takes 5 days to get you off the drugs. It takes another 7 days to get you comfortable with what you're doing. And that's why we have a 12-day program. You need to kind of get everything ingrained so that when you go out and face the world, you're ready, you're strong, you're convinced. You don't have to, and you're over most of the transition and the troubles and the worries and so on.
Nice. Well, believe it or not, we're down to the last 2 questions. By that, I mean ones that have been submitted. I always give priority to the people that write them in because it's the fair thing to do. So get on my list if you want to ask. And this one is from Aaron. I've been taking enzyme supplements before every meal for about 5 years now. Are there any adverse side effects from using enzyme supplements for prolonged periods? I feel I've become dependent on them for digestion, and I don't want to keep spending money on them. The brand I use is Entrantil. Ever heard of it? I've been vegan for almost a year now. I eat lots of veggies, potatoes, small amounts of beans, tofu. You're going to be speaking.
I'm assuming that she's tested the digestive enzymes to see that they really do work. In other words, she stopped them for a significant period of time, seeing that she doesn't feel as well as whatever she would define as poor digestion. Then she's restarted it and found out it helps her. In that case, you should be taking them. But I think you should do that test to make sure you really need them and you're not wasting your money by spending at best on a placebo. So, If it works, fine. I don't see any particular harm. People who have pancreatic disease, they need digestive enzymes. So there are actual conditions where people who have to take these, these potions and pills. And in the usual healthy person, it's not the case, but some people do. Yeah.
Nice. And one thing that's very cool is we're getting a lot of the plant-based doctors in the GI space as GI specialists too. And a lot of them do virtual consults. So
well,
that could be an option too, possibly. So, all right, last question. Okay, this is from, I hope you're still here. I saw you were there earlier asking if I'd gotten to your question. We saved the best for last. A form of this has come up before from Ridwana, but how do I decrease my LDL and total cholesterol? I lost 50 pounds, removed animal products, oil, and fat. My high triglycerides have decreased to 130, just under the cutoff. My low HDL increased to 60, above the cutoff. However, LDL is 152 and total cholesterol is elevated ever since she stopped intermittent fasting. Do you ever recommend intermittent fasting to your patients?
Well, I don't think it would hurt, but by definition, fasting is temporary. Then you have to go back and eat something. You can't starve forever. So, you might give it a try. As I mentioned to you, some people, their cholesterols go up or stay the same. Some go down. The average for the whole group is 22 points in 7 days. So the other thing that could be happening is you could have mobilized cholesterol and other products of food by losing weight. We know that when people fast, so therefore they're burning a lot of body fat, that their cholesterol and uric acid can go up, because when you burn the fat, you release these chemicals from the body fat. And so they will go up as you're losing weight. And that may be one of the reasons that yours went up, is because you've lost the 40, 50 pounds. It goes back to the same discussion. What are you worried about? Are you worried about the numbers, which we can make just great with a bunch of medication? Or do you want to get well? And, if you need to make the numbers better after you get well, we got pills that'll do that too. They work just as well before or after you change your diet. So if the numbers are still bothering you and you think you need to cover all bases, which I'm fine with. I listen to my patients. When they tell me, look, doc, I know my cholesterol is 180, but you said it should be ideal. And I can't sleep at night because mine's still 180, even though you tell me it's okay. It came down from 280 to 180. I can't sleep at night, doc. Can't you give me a statin drug to get my cholesterol down to 150? I'd probably do it. Yeah. I'm there to make sure that everything I can help get fixed gets fixed. And if taking a relatively non-toxic, relatively inexpensive medication, which, by the way, could make a difference in them having a stroke or heart attack, even though the evidence doesn't show much benefit on average, they could be that one lucky person who the statin made all the difference in the world in. So when it comes to those kind of decisions, they need to be made after a good discussion, a good understanding about you from your doctor, and deciding what you really are asking for. And you need to be a good communicator. We should do a whole show on communication.
Oh yeah, I would love it anytime. Well, I think this would be a good place to end.
Oh, it's fun.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much. This was a McDougall marathon, and this was perfect because this is a very special day. It's World Vegan Day, and we thank everyone for being vegan and for being kind to animals. And we thank you so much, Dr. McDougall and Mary, for coming on the show once a month now. Next month, it'll be the 9th, I believe. It'll be the second Monday, just because we have the GI Health Summit. Oh, excuse me, it's Monday, December 13th. And because you're actually in the GI Health Summit giving a wonderful lecture that you did. You have a wonderful book on GI health called The Digestive Tune-Up, which is one of my favorite books of yours because it has cartoons.
Yeah, that's a fun book, and we should talk about that book sometimes too.
Yes.
But in the meantime, over the next 5 weeks, I hope you have time to read McDougall's Medicine: A Challenging Second Opinion, the book I wrote in 1985, which we're giving away for free, no gimmicks, which I expect you to pass on to your friends and relatives and medical specialists and so on. And we don't walk into the doctor and say, look, this is what Dr. McDougall has to say about artery disease. Tell me why he's wrong. You know, he said this 35 years ago. He's an old fart now. He's got to have been wrong. That's old information. Or I've got rheumatoid arthritis and he says I'd be cured. Or I've got nephritis, kidney disease, and he said I could be cured. Tell me why he's wrong. You know, take that trouble and use the book. It's a challenging second opinion. And insist that people who are important to you read this, particularly people who are involved in your care. Why should anybody be afraid of another opinion? Well, I want to tell you, you're going to find, well, I hope you aren't surprised, but you're going to be surprised that your fellow doctors don't have much to say. That challenging second opinion is very solid. I worked 6 years to put it together. I had that reviewed by 3 specialists in every category that I wrote about to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes. The truth don't change, folks. So get the book, get it free. If you have trouble getting it free, I don't know, you're going to put a link up there?
Yeah, Heather's and I have been texting. So we believe that the link we have now works, but I will test it before
All right,
the
good.
show notes. So
Okay, well, it's free, so don't pay $10 for it, but we're not going to keep it free forever. Well, maybe we will.
well, that was so generous during the pandemic. You even gave your courses that were several $100s.
We gave everything away for free.
Yeah. Well, you're one of the good ones. That's for sure. We appreciate what you do so much. And hopefully you will go down in history as being remembered as such. But I worry that people aren't going to realize what you said was true until after you're long gone.
That's just the way it is. There's that, heroes are forgotten in their own town. That's just natural. I expect to be forgotten. Just like Nathan Pritikin and Walter Kempner have been forgotten. But hopefully there's somebody someday who's alive, after me, who says, you should read this Dr. McDougall, see whether or not he's got it right. That's why I wrote everything down. I put everything on video, is that my hope is that after Mary and I are forgotten, and we will be, we deserve to be forgotten, that somebody will look back at what we did and challenge the ongoing opinions, challenge, the wrong that's being done. And I put these things out in paper and out in good video form for a reason. And I put the effort into making sure that they were well done for a reason. And it goes past our lifetime.
Well, you will definitely be remembered. Thank you guys so much. And I look forward to seeing you next month.
All right. Good. Have a good time. And by the way, AJ, I hope everybody appreciates what you're doing. The reason that I do my new material on your show is because I know, I've been around a long time, and I know that you're going to be a sensation here in the near future. People are going to look to you and consider you one of the most important medical bloggers in the entire world. And you have the personality, you have the friendliness, you have the connections to make all this work. And so for me, this is the best place for me to present myself is on your forum. And I want to thank you.
Oh, thank you.
We didn't always start out that way, did we, AJ?
That's a very kind comment for somebody who's a misogynist.
Yeah, right. I'll go look that word up.
Oh my God, I'll never hear the end of it. Well, thank you guys so much. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when my guest is Chris Wark, who beat cancer, and he'll be talking about his new book, Chris Cancer Kitchen. Thanks so much, McDougalls. We love you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.